What if pain led Bella and Jacob to each other? Hey everyone. This is the grand finale, part 3. Get ready for the climax, surprises, and the ending you've been waiting for. Let's go. Billy rolled into the living room and asked to be alone with Jacob. Danny stepped out of the room to let them have a chance to talk. Billy had a long discussion with Jacob about imprinting in his role as Alpha and future chief. He reiterated how proud he was of him for handling an undeniably difficult situation the best that he knew how. Billy admitted that he wasn't sure anyone else would have handled it as well as Jacob had. According to the old journals, there was no way a wolf could resist the imprint pull. Billy believed had Jacob tried to ignore it, the consequences would have been disastrous. When Billy was done, he handed Jacob a small beaded bag and told him he thought Jacob should have what was inside. Jacob peeked into the bag and was surprised at what was inside. "Are you sure, Dad?" he asked. "Very sure," he affirmed. After Danny physically shoved Jacob out the door, he started walking down the dirt road toward home. A rumbling car engine was coming down north the road and he glanced over his shoulder to see Embry driving his old VW Golf. The car slowed and Embry cranked the window down. Jacob leaned in the window, his head held down, feeling pretty crappy all around. "Get in," Embry sighed. "I'm sorry for freaking out. It's just Danny and I have been talking a lot lately since I've been staying with her, you know. She's holding up in front of you but she's torn up." Jacob sighed. He had a feeling, and in a way he'd have been surprised if it were any other way. Not that he wished it on her, it was the reality of the current situation. "I'm sorry if you thought I was being insensitive. I know, Jake, we're good. I can't imagine being in your place, having to choose. I hope I never imprint. Ever. I know what you mean. I don't regret meeting Bella. I love her, I truly do. But I can say in some ways I wish it happened before I got married and had children. Of course, having Hope and Riker, I wouldn't trade them for anything. I hate that we've all had to go through this." Embry kept driving but didn't tell Jacob where he was taking him. He knew that Jacob and Bella needed to talk. Having been best friends with Jacob all of his life, Embry was well aware of Jacob's stubborn tendencies. He'd put off making up with Bella, so he was going to make it easy on his friend. Jacob looked up and saw where they were headed. Instead of arguing with his friend anymore, he sat quietly and appreciated the effort. When he hopped out of the passenger seat, he rolled the window up and thanked him. He didn't say for what, but Embry knew he meant for being a supportive friend. Bella's Jeep was parked in the driveway and Charlie's cruiser was gone, Jacob noted thankfully. He didn't think Charlie would shoot him anywhere, but it wasn't a theory he wanted to test. Before he made it to the front door, a low yip was heard from the trees. Jacob peered around the side of the White House to see Jared. "Don't leave yet." Double yip. Jacob stood in front of the door, unsure of what he was going to say when he talked to Bella. This was all so new to him, and while he had gotten to know her over the last months, this was their first big fight. He could hear the deadbolt unlatching and he realized his time to think things over had ended. "You know I can hear your loud thoughts all the way upstairs. When were you going to knock or ring the bell?" she asked jokingly. She gave him a tentative smile. "Can we go to the cliffs and talk?" he decided at that moment. Bella nodded. "It might be cold, so go grab a jacket." Bella returned with her jacket and keys. Jacob held his hand out in a silent request to drive and Bella relinquished her keys to him. She didn't know the way to the cliffs that well, so it was better that he drove. Neither of them spoke on the drive, and when Jacob parked, he jogged around to Bella's side to help her out. He didn't release her hand as he helped her walk up the path. Once they reached the top, he found a flat area for them to sit. He remembered how nervous Bella was close to the edge, so he tried to stay further back from it. She sat on the ground and looked up to him, waiting for him to speak. After pacing around a little bit, he finally sat directly opposite Bella with his legs folded in an identical manner. He cupped his hands over her kneecaps. "Bells, thanks for coming out here with me." He let out a deep breath. I need tea. Oh, explain what you heard the other night. I'm sure you did not hear everything I said or we wouldn't be here fighting. I was blindsided by the imprint. We both were. It wasn't something I believed was going to happen ever. I thought this part of me was over and done with. It was unexpected. Danny and I were going along in life. We're great friends and good parents to our children. It rocked everybody's lives when it ended the way it did. But do I regret it? No, I don't. I don't want to dismiss what Danny and I had because it was great. I'm sure I would have been happy my whole life. But since I've met you, I feel so different. In a good way. I'm more confident and sure of myself. I feel at peace with who I am. I'm a better alpha and the pack works together amazingly well. But more than that, I love you. I love how you are with my kids and that you've tried to find your place in their lives. I love how you've worked at being friends with Danny. How many times does that happen? He scoffed. I love how accepting you are of people, which makes me wonder why you hate Mike Newton so much. He laughed, remembering Bella's aversion to his physical therapist. She grinned the slightest bit at his joke. But she still hadn't looked up at him. He reached out and brushed his fingers over her soft skin. I love you, honey. I am excited that we're having a baby. I am sorry for sounding like such a jackass with Embry. He took me off guard. I thought he'd be the most supportive. I talked to him tonight and he is. Jacob reached into his pocket and pulled out the tiny beaded bag. He shook its contents into his hand and held it out to her. Please marry me, he asked again, waiting for her to pick up the ring. Jacob, this is beautiful, she gasped. It was my mother's. My dad gave it to me, said he wanted you to have it. You're a part of my family now. It might be unconventional, but that's what it is. So, will you marry me? He smiled at her. She sniffled back tears and nodded her head. He gently wiggled the ring on her finger, surprised that his mother's ring fit Bella so well. Then he leaned forward and placed a soft kiss on her cheek. She turned her face into his and kissed him on the mouth. Enjoying the warm fullness of his lips, Jacob pulled Bella back with him. She was straddling his chest and then laid on top of him, her ear over his heart. They didn't say anything for a while, simply enjoying the feel of the other. The sounds of the ocean and the night. Bella shifted off Jacob's chest, so that she was lying beside him, her head resting in his armpit. He wrapped his arm around her to pull her close to his body. Her fingers reached out and traced over his chest. She noticed he was only wearing shorts, and when she asked where his clothes were, he responded with one word: shredded. She kissed his chest where she could reach and gathered her thoughts. I'm sorry too, for running away without hearing you out. I already feel so guilty about coming into your life and turning it upside down. Not only do I tear your marriage apart, but I've brought vampires on my heels. Me being here made all of you guys phase again. I keep thinking about all of the what ifs. What if I had never met the Cullens? What if I had stayed away from them like I should have? What if I never had the accident, or if I never came back to Charlie's? Even, what if I chose a different physical therapy center? Jacob turned and looked at her. She was staring at his chest, her thoughts somewhere else. He kissed the top of her head. He had thought about a lot of his own what ifs, but in the end they couldn't change what had happened. You know, that's why those things are what ifs, and we'll never know. We have to go forward from here without looking back anymore. We are who we are. We're in a committed relationship, bonded together for the rest of our lives, getting ready to have a baby, he said, patting her side with his hand. I told you the night that Cullen took you that I was sure that day I loved you. Maybe I haven't done a good enough job showing you that. I'm sorry, I'll work on it, he whispered. He pulled her body up toward him so he could kiss her. She kissed him back, and before long they were making out like teenagers. They both lost themselves to their feelings of love and peace the other provided. At the top of the cliff, they promised their love to each other in more ways than one. Bella sat astride Jacob, her head leaned back, his hands guiding her. Yet, in the treetops far enough away to stay undetected, watched a furious Edward. He was disgusted that she would allow him To do such things outside where anyone could stumble across them. His Bella wasn't such a shameless harlot like this woman he was watching now. He took off into the night unable to watch anymore, he had been able to take her from her bedroom when she was there. But that damn wolf wouldn't stop pacing in the 100-yard stretch behind her house. Bella and Jacob walked back down the path, hand in hand. When they reached her jeep, he unlocked it but didn't open the door right away. He continued to kiss her passionately, then continued to cover her face, neck, and shoulders. She relaxed and moved her head to give him better access. "I love you," he stated firmly and helped her into the jeep, giving her one last kiss before slamming the door and running around to the driver's side. After he started the engine, he grabbed her hand. His fingers lightly played with the new engagement ring. His life wasn't conventional, but he was happy. "Been too long since we've heard from Edward, you know." Edward had never been more enraged in his entire life than he was after seeing Bella astride Jacob's body on the top of the cliffs. It was disgusting, and yet he found himself riveted to the scene. It had been him to bring her to such heights. He took his fury out on several unsuspecting women walking home from a nightclub in Seattle. He drained their bodies dry and then ran to Denali. When he got there, he found Tanya and used her body, pretending she was Bella in his mind. Afterward, when she tried to cuddle up to his side, he threatened to kill her if she touched him again. She stood gaping at him as he dressed and left. She hadn't taken the time to take in his features when he first arrived. Having wanted him for years, she didn't hesitate when he came onto her suddenly. "Your eyes, Edward, you've slipped from your diet," she asked, softly. He stared at her, piercing her golden eyes with his eyes bright like fire. "Oh, save it, Tanya, don't act like you've never slipped," he scoffed. She hung her head in shame, recalling the time her thirst hadn't gotten the better of her after the Volturi had killed her mother. She hadn't meant to go so long without feeding, she was grieving. "You know that was an accident. You're angry, what happened?" "Don't worry about me, I'm leaving." "Wait, Edward, you just got here. So, you don't want to stay for a while, make love again?" "We did not make love. I don't love you. This was a fuck to satisfy both our needs. You know you wanted it." Tanya stood stammering, unable to think of anything to say as Edward took off in a blur. She shook her head as she walked out of her bedroom. Then she turned back and ripped the sheets from her bed. She threw the shreds in the garbage can outside before replacing them with new ones from the linen closet. Edward ran back to Vancouver to catch a plane to New York. He had business to conduct there. Things were getting off track since Victoria. She had really fucked shit up for him. He was tired of his perfectionist act with everyone. Attending high school and college with Bella. He finally got her to New York, but he wasn't ready to give her up yet. The first human he'd ever been near whose thoughts were silent. Then, she was accepting of his nature, not questioning him at all. It was a respite from the constant thoughts of other women. Their thoughts were repulsing, the things they were willing to do for him for sex. Had he used those human women, his employer surely would have had him killed. It was his job to find young women who would not be missed to send to Italy. There could not be a NY evidence to connect the missing women. In exchange for his services, Arrow let Edward live his life the way he wanted. The moment the gig was up, Edward was dead. Edward had been careful to keep Arrow from touching him since he met Bella. He knew without a doubt the other man would insist on her being changed and added to his collection in Volterra. The man was a hoarder of sorts, but with people. He was sure that Arrow had a mountain of skeletons in his closet, both figuratively and literally. Edward wanted her to be his mate and he knew she would be perfect, her mind silenced to him for all time. He knew that Alice was no longer able to see her and he hoped that once changed she would be able to hide them from Volturi trackers. After returning to his apartment from the airport, he showered and put on his suit. He flipped in the green contacts he wore for these occasions and checked his appearance before leaving. The number of women that they wanted was increasing each time and he was having difficulty finding more and more women that would not be missed. He'd rented a storage unit on the shady side of town and kept them locked in cages until his shipment was ready. He went to different bars and clubs each time so that no one would begin to recognize him. He'd order a different drink and sit in various places, listening to the thoughts of those in the room. Typically, he'd find a girl who was alone hoping to meet up with someone while they were there. Then he would smile at them and ask them to dance or if he could buy them a drink. He would lie about who he was and what he did. The women would always go with him. The advantage of knowing their thoughts, knowing exactly what they were wishing for. Any woman who was resistant or thinking about who would notice them missing were left alone. Tonight he was at a dumpy bar, pretending to drink a Jack and Coke. He listened out into the room. There was a lot of people that were there together from work celebrating someone's birthday. None of them would work. You planning on drinking that drink? The bartender smiled at him. She was an older woman, who looked like she'd spent the majority of her life in the sun. Her skin was wrinkled and blemishes covered her skin. Just waiting on someone, he smiled at her, attempting to dazzle her with his beauty. She walked away, her thoughts annoying to Edward. She was thinking he was in the wrong place in his designer suit. The snooty bars were a block over. Have a good night, he called out, tossing the contents of the glass into his mouth in her line of sight. Then he walked out on the sidewalk and sprayed the contents on the ground. He wiped his lips and started the walk back to his apartment, more frustrated than before. As Edward raced along the sidewalk, he heard the thoughts of his next victim. She had just been assaulted in the alley he was coming up on and was curled into a ball crying. The man who hurt her was zipping his pants as Edward rounded the corner. He eared at the man, causing him to run away from the area. "Hi, are you okay? Can I help you?" he asked, sounding genuinely concerned. "Can I call the police for you, a friend or a family?" Her thoughts were jumbled, scared of a new man coming upon her, scared that no one would notice if she went missing. She couldn't believe she had come to New York alone to try and be a model. She was such an idiot. Man she had met claimed to be an agent. "How about I leave you here and go get some help?" he offered. No, please don't leave me here alone, he might come back," she cried. "I'm going to help you stand up now, Oka." He carefully placed his icy hands under the sleeves of her shirt so he wouldn't touch her skin. He helped her to her feet and then stepped back. Her eyes traveled over his body and he decided an attacker wouldn't be dressed so nicely. Edward was pleased that she was already trusting him. "My sister, Alice, and I have an apartment just around the corner. I could call her and see if it's okay if I bring you there. She can help you get cleaned up and maybe you could borrow her clothes." He waited until she nodded. Then he turned and pretended to call Alice. "She says it's fine and he'll take you to the hospital if you want." "Okay," the woman whimpered. "My name is Anthony Masson," he lied to her. "What's your name?" "Hi, I'm Brianna," she said, trying to stifle her tears as she slowly stepped forward. "Let me help you." Edward sighed as he wrapped his arm around her shoulder and walked her forward. When they got closer to his apartment, he took his phone out of his pocket for a brief call. Alice ran down to get some first aid supplies. "She'll be right back up." Inside, he helped her to sit on the couch and gave her a blanket to cover her body. He went into the kitchen and made her a mug of tea. "Brianna, I made you some tea. Alice says it always makes her feel better." He smiled crookedly, dazzling the other woman. She took the warm mug and sipped gratefully, allowing it to soothe her sore throat. Edward encouraged her to finish it, saying it would help her throat recover from the screaming. When the cup was empty, he took it from her and said he was going to go in the kitchen to call Alice to see what was taking so long. He stood in the kitchen and counted to 60 before returning to the living room. Finally, "I didn't think you were ever going to drink it all," he sneered at her limp form. He wrapped her body in the blanket and carried her out onto the fire escape. He put her body in the last empty cage. He stepped out into the night to call Arrow and let him know their next order was ready. "Edward, how are you?" he asked in his fake voice. I'm so happy you called. When will you be traveling to Italy? Oh, Arrow, with all the work you have me doing, I don't think I can make it any time soon, he chuckled, attempting to amuse the other man. Well, you have been choosing the best of the best, Edward. We really appreciate what you're doing for us. Just remember, if anybody starts sniffing around. I know. Edward cut him off. Edward ended the call and stepped back into the storage unit. He needed to make sure all of the women were alive and well. If one of them arrived dead, he would be starting back at square one. He checked them and they all seemed to be hungry. So he went out and ordered 25-star dinners to go and brought them back. He gave them all bottles of soda or juice and left them with extra bottles of water to drink. They were starving and most hadn't had such a glorious meal in their lives ever before, so they ate quickly. He walked out of the unit and locked each of the locks back to secure the unit. Gross, he muttered, thinking about them eating like farm animals and smelling like them too. Never mind the fact he hadn't fed them in 4 days. He had to go back to Washington to check on Bella. He hoped this was the last shipment he would have to do before he and Bella were able to disappear for good. Edward saw a large native-looking man walking ahead of him. He crept up behind him and envisioned that it was that bastard, Jacob Black. He pulled the man into the shadows and snapped his neck. It didn't matter that it wasn't Jacob Black or even a Quileute. The next night, after Edward watched the red container loaded on the ship, he left the port and bought a ticket for the next flight to Seattle. He hoped they all survived the trip because he didn't want to do this again. He was tired of having Arrow holding shit over his head. Pasty old fucker. It was time for him to go get his Bella. She would no longer have to tolerate that overgrown fleabag anymore. He would enjoy killing that bastard with his bare hands, listening to him beg for his pathetic life. Edward would enjoy listening to him beg, knowing that he'd die a slow and painful death. It turned out the night Edward returned to Forks was the night of Bella's 30th birthday celebration. Security around the reservation was tighter than ever, and Edward noticed there were a bunch of new wolves. Somehow he was unable to read their thoughts. Had that juvenile alpha figured out how to block him out? He only knew they were coming when he could hear their heartbeats or paws scratching the earth and brush. He climbed that same treetop again and watched with his keen eyesight the celebration on the beach. There were at least 20 people around the campfire having a good time eating and laughing. His Bella sat with that mongrel's arm wrapped tightly around her. Patient as ever, he sat watching, hoping for the opportunity to get to her. At one point, she stood from her chair and stretched. She jerked and held her hand over her lower belly, caressing it and laughing. The mutt came over and she placed his hand where she'd just had hers. Then he placed his disgusting lips on hers while the others around hooted and hollered. Unexpectedly, a loud howl sounded from below him. Damn, his location was revealed. He fled at top speed. The next evening when he had returned to the area where he was able to hide and have a perfect view of the beach and cliffs, he found that the trees had been chopped down. They were huge trees as well. Edward's eyes caught a paper blowing. When he walked up, he saw a note had been nailed to the tree. It said, "You're dead, motherfucker." Edward snatched it off the tree and ripped it into confetti before running back to the old Cullen house. He yanked his phone out of his pocket. "What, Alice?" he snapped. "Your shipment is not going to survive. They're going to demand replacement and more, as well as a trip to Volterra. You need to leave Washington right now," she commanded him. "Damn it," he yelled, breaking another phone in his hand. He tried to get one last glimpse of Bella before leaving again for New York, but the damn wolves were everywhere and he couldn't. The flight attendant on his chartered flight smiled appreciatively when he stepped aboard the plane. She wondered how he'd feel about joining the Mile High Club with her, as he offered him refreshments before takeoff. He ignored her and sat back with his eyes closed. He was envisioning how he would pluck the wolves off one by one. Then he imagined strapping Jacob Black to WN and forcing him to sit by and watch her transformation. He laughed when he imagined her sucking him dry when she woke up. He couldn't sleep, but he enjoyed his thoughts the rest of the flight back to New York. The flight attendant would be number one on his list. I don't want a party, Jacob, Bella stated firmly. I don't do birthday parties. Please don't make me do this. I hate being the center of attention and given lavish gifts. I feel so inadequate. Honey, we always have a bonfire for birthdays. It's tradition. Don't worry about gifts because the only thing people bring is food. I'll even let you bake some delicious cake if you insist. Don't let everybody down. I'll sit by you the whole time, I promise, he begged softly, kissing her belly. It was Friday morning and Jacob told Bella about the bonfire party they were having for her that night. He hadn't told her about it sooner because things had been hectic with new wolves and tight security patrols. He was starting to feel like why we're on borrowed time with Edward and possibly other vampires. Now that she was pregnant and her belly was starting to pooch out a bit, he was more protective than ever. She wavered a little, so he continued to warm her stomach with his soft lips. She moaned and he added in a light bite every few kisses, widening his path away from her lower stomach. Please, honey, for me, he pleaded, moving up higher on her chest, right between and then over her breasts. They'd both discovered how erotic this area felt to her after they made up. After their clifftop love-making session, neither could be sated. Ella never gave him a direct answer. However, she became involved in the passionate morning escapade. She lay smiling at the ceiling when they were done, feeling blissful. Jacob had taught her a low tea and he was magnificent at finding every place that made her moan. The pack had grown used to Jacob showing up to patrol reeking of sex and Bella. They were glad for their brother's happiness, but all wished he would shower before he ran with them. Jacob knew what they were thinking, but the wolf really didn't care. That part of him loved warding other males off their mate, even if those males wouldn't dare look at her that way. Be ready to go by 5 o'clock, okay? Jacob told her, grinning as he walked out of the bedroom. He wasn't going to wait around to hear her complain about it. The pack fires were a great time for everyone and they needed a reason to party, truthfully. A resounding groan could be heard before he shut the front door, laughing. Bella rolled out of the bed and went into the bathroom. As became a part of her morning routine, she stood in front of the mirror analyzing her stomach. She ran her hand over her little bump that had popped out in the last week. At her last appointment, she reiterated her worry to the doctor and he promised it wouldn't be long that she would be feeling movement and showing. While her stomach had finally popped, she still hadn't felt anything. Baby, how are you doing in there? She cooed, as she rubbed the spot. No response. Of course, she sighed. Then she hopped in the shower and went into the kitchen to think about what she should make for the bonfire. It helped to think of it as just a bonfire, not her birthday party. It brought memories of Alice's overdone celebrations where she was compelled to overeat cake since she was the only one that ate. She shook it off and set about looking around the kitchen. Thinking about how much the pack preferred to eat and that there were so many of them now, she decided to make something that was pretty easy. She went for dump cakes. They were simple and the ingredients she needed were in the pantry. After she finished baking, she left them to cool on the counter. The sound of Hawaii Five-0 soundtrack rang out and Bella went in search of her phone. Hey, Dad, she smiled answering. Happy birthday to you, he squawked out. Bella held the phone away from her ear and laughed as he finished his off-key rendition of the song. Happy birthday, Bells. Thanks, Dad. Are you coming tonight? I wouldn't miss your birthday party. Of course I'll be there. Bella groaned. It's a bonfire, not my birthday party. I'm too old for birthdays. Too old, he laughed. You're never too old for birthdays. I've got some gifts for you and everything. I'll see you tonight, Dad. Can't wait. Love you, he said, before clicking the phone off. Jacob got home from work at 4 o'clock to make sure he had enough time to convince Bella to go to the bonfire. He found her asleep on the couch with a book in her lap. Carefully, he grabbed the book and placed it upside down on the coffee table so he wouldn't lose the page. Unfortunately, he had learned the hard way from his sisters that would cause screaming and yelling at him. He debated whether he should wake her or let her sleep, but he decided to let her rest and to get himself ready first. His clothes dropped on the bathroom floor and he stepped into the shower. The minute he closed his eyes to wash his hair, a hand grasped him. "There. What did I tell you about leaving your clothes in the middle of the floor?" she whispered, squeezing her fingers the slightest bit. He squeaked. Then he reached out and grabbed her body, pulling her close into the spray of the water. "Ah, Jake, I'm sorry. You were sleeping. I thought I'd have them picked up before you woke up." He rinsed his hair and opened his eyes. Then he leaned down to give her a hello kiss. She returned his peck with a welcome home kiss that involved her tongue swirling around his. She'd RNED. He liked it when she sucked on his tongue a little, so when he pushed into her mouth, she did that for him. It caused him to be rock hard. Instantly. "Let me finish washing up and then let's take this to bed." "I don't want you to slip in the shower," he told her. "I'm not a fragile flower, you know." "Oh, I know. But, you are a klutz and could slip at any moment on sandpaper," he joked. She decided that instead of responding with words, she'd get him back another way. She grabbed the bar of soap and soaped up her hands. She lathered them up and started rubbing all around his groin, up and down each thick muscular thigh, just below his butt cheek. Then she repeated it on the other leg. She cleaned each firm cheek, rubbing her chest against his stomach. Then she smiled, kissed his chest, and rinsed her hands. "I don't have time to play around. I have to get ready to go to a bonfire," she announced, leaving the shower. Jacob groaned in frustration, looking down at his unattended hard-on. "Don't even think about it," she called as she left the bathroom. Finally, Bella and Jacob showed up to the bonfire, only half an hour late. The wolves that were off patrol were already there with their imprints or alone. They cheered and jeered the pair as they walked up. The wolves could scent the fresh smell of sex on both of them again. "God dang, I am going to be embarrassed walking around with a boner again," Colin complained. The pack laughed, while the others stared at him in disbelief. When Bella looked at Charlie, she saw he had turned a dark shade of red. She could understand how he was feeling. He and Billy had become friends and Billy was cajoling Charlie into being excited about his future grandchild. Charlie was coming around. He was starting to think if circumstances were different, he might have liked Jacob a lot. Hope and Riker ran up to them a few minutes later. "Daddy," they called as they jogged over the sand to him. He squatted down to catch them in his arms and gave them a hug. "We miss you. I've missed you guys too. I've been really busy with work, too. But I'm not working as much this week when you stay at my house." "Do you mean you're in Bella's house?" Hope asked in her sweet girl voice. "Rye said that we were going to get an evil stepmother when you guys get married." "Miss Bella, will you turn evil when you marry Daddy?" Bella froze. It was Jacob that handled the situation in a calm, firm manner like always. "Do you think Bella is evil, Hope?" "No, I think she's pretty nice." "Riker, do you think Bella is evil?" Riker blushed a bright red that might have gone unnoticed in the dark by someone else. "Why did you say that then?" Jacob prodded gently. "Because Tommy said that when his mom got remarried, his stepdad was real nice until after the wedding. Then he started being mean and hitting him and his mom." Jacob filed that tidbit away for later thought and spoke honestly with his son. "Bella and I will be getting married soon. She won't turn into an evil stepmom. You'll still have me, and Mommy is going to come by the house when you're there. You'll see, we'll all be okay." Jacob grabbed Riker and tugged the boy into another hug. "I wish you and Mommy were still married and you never met Bella." He cried and spun out of his father's arms, running away. He watched as Danny followed him, waving him off. As Jacob stepped off to follow them, his attention was grabbed by his pack. "Jake, what's going on?" "Bella, happy birthday," Quill drawled as he walked up, Claire in tow. Their hands were loosely clasped together and she laughed lightly looking at them. "Congratulations, you guys. We're so excited for you," Claire said. "I keep trying to talk Quill into having a baby, but he says he needs to grow up first. So we might never have kids." Hey, I resemble that remark. Quill scoffed, then grinned. Thanks. We're really excited, Bella said. Jacob pulled Bella over to a driftwood log and they sat down, letting people come to them to say hello. He thought it helped Bella with her shyness around the group of otherwise gregarious people. Everyone brought dishes to share and Bella ate a little of everything even if it was only a teaspoonful. Charlie commented to Billy and how much those big guys ate and how did they afford to feed them all. Billy laughed and said it wasn't his responsibility anymore, but he nearly went broke when Jacob lived at home. The conversation remained lighthearted and those that weren't in the know didn't seem to notice when the wolves that were on patrol switched out with the new patrol. The laughter could be heard all around as they enjoyed the bonfire. When they'd finished eating, Danny and the kids came to give them both hugs and kisses before heading home to bed. Rachel and Paul were going to have a sleepover at Danny's house with Will, so that Paul would be there on guard. Bella hugged them all, only a tad awkward, and thanked them for coming. The pack wished Bella a happy birthday and the only gifts she received were from her dad. She tried to wait to open them, but he insisted that she open them right then. She turned a dark crimson when she opened a keychain with pepper spray attached and Charlie pointed at Jacob, raising his eyebrows. She also opened a couple of maternity t-shirts, which were perfectly suited for her and a maternity sweater. Last, she opened a stun gun. She looked at Charlie gaping, who she saw wink at Jacob. The rest of the guys laughed at Charlie's way of handling Bella's pregnancy. Things started to wind down and Bella stood up. She stretched her arms over her head and told Jacob she was ready to go. Then she squealed and put her hands down on her belly. Jacob jumped to her side thinking something was wrong with the baby. Then he saw her bright smile. I felt the baby nudge me. I can't believe it. She caressed herself again. Jacob smiled and held his hand across her belly. He looked into her eyes and leaned down to kiss her. The group cheered in celebration at their alpha pair. They all hipped toward the cliffs when a loud howl sounded off. Time to go, Sam said. I'm exhausted. Yeah, me too, Emily agreed, helping Sam gather their things, so Sam could go on ahead. They both knew it wouldn't be as easy for Jacob and Bella to escape with Charlie there. All of the single wolves discreetly took off. It was a howl of alarm and they couldn't leave the skeleton crew patrolling. The imprint. TS and wives started helping gather up the food, signaling the end of the bonfire. People grabbed their dishes and headed toward their cars. Bella and Jacob were standing near Billy and Charlie, thanking them for coming. Charlie kept asking Bella what the rush was. It was her birthday. Dad, I'm tired as all. The baby is sucking up my energy, she explained. Maybe you shouldn't do so much. You should stop working, he scolded her. Seriously, Dad, I talked to the doctor and he said it's completely fine to keep working. Lots of women work when they're pregnant, she told him, rolling her eyes. I don't want you overdoing it is all. You're my little girl. I want to make sure you're taken care of is all. Thanks, Dad. I'm a big girl now. I've been out of diapers for quite a while now, and I even lived on my own, in case you've forgotten. She reached out and hugged him and told him softly, I love you and thanks for caring about me. He squeezed her back before stepping away. We'll see you guys soon, Jacob said, hugging his dad and reaching out to shake Charlie's hand. He shook his hand quickly and let go. Charlie, why don't you come back to my house and we can catch up on the news and have a beer? Billy suggested. Sounds great. Let's go, Charlie said, leaving without looking back. I didn't think he was going to let us leave, Jacob whispered to Bella. As soon as we get home, I've got to go. I'm sorry to run out on your birthday. It's fine. Don't worry. I told you I don't want you to do anything for my birthday, she said, following after his much larger stride. He had the truck door open for her and helped her get inside. Then he leaned over and kissed her quick and sweet. I didn't forget to get you a gift, but it'll have to wait now. And I will always do something to celebrate your birthday. Then he shut the door on her protest, jogging around to the driver's side. They rushed home and it was Seth that was waiting at the house for them. As soon as they pulled into the driveway, Jacob said he loved her and bye. He was gone before Bella made it to the front door. "What took you guys so long?" Seth asked. "Charlie. He wouldn't stop talking," Bella told him. The two headed in the house and settled on the couch for a marathon of Top Chef. Both were addicted to it and had fun talking about the odd things people made. Meanwhile, Jacob ran swiftly through the woods. He scanned the thoughts of his pack and had ascertained that Edward Cullen had been caught within their boundaries again. It seemed he was using the trees to his advantage. Jacob was furious. That bloodsucker had crossed too many boundaries and he only hoped to rip him to shreds. It pushed his wolf faster. When he reached the area Cullen had been found, he lost it. He phased back to human form, and punched the tree. "Fucking bastard," he screamed into the night. He turned around to see several wolves shuffling behind him, unsure what to do with his fury. No one had ever seen Jacob that mad. Ever. Everyone find every saw they own. These trees are coming down tonight. He will not come back to this spot ever again and spy on us. It was Sam that phased back to talk to him. "Jake, man, I agree with you, he's off his rocker. But cutting down these trees, they're really old. It doesn't seem right. Maybe you should wait until you calm down to make a decision like that." Sam backed up when he saw how pissed Jacob remained. "That rotten piece of shit will not spy on us from his perch ever again. Cut them down. We are going to send him a message." Everyone turned and ran, having been commanded by their alpha. It wasn't long that the strong men had chopped down the beautiful trees. They stood around them, looking sad at destroying a beautiful part of the forest for a not-so-great reason. Jacob stormed up from behind them, a paper flapping in one hand, nails and hammer in the other. He pounded the nails into the tree and stomped back. "I'd say that's sending a message," Embry muttered, walking away shaking his head. Jacob had been his best friend his whole life. He didn't really agree with Jacob's decision, but he understood the man was frustrated with having a lunatic vampire chasing after his fiancée and ex-wife. That he still cared for deeply. They all phased back, somber. No one knew what was coming, but listening to the thoughts of so many wolves phased together, they realized it was something big. Rushing through the trees and around the perimeter, the pack was focused together for once. No one's stray thoughts floated through the night and everyone was searching for one thing. The scent of vampire. They weren't all together. They were running in pairs but spaced out like the spokes of a Ferris wheel. The only two missing wolves were with Bella and Danny and the kids. Seth was with Belle and surprisingly one of the new wolves was with Danny. Jacob had a singular focus at that time and it was to kill. He wouldn't let anyone have a stray thought. After several hours of this, dawn began to break over the horizon. He knew everyone was exhausted from the night. A quick survey let him know that Leah and Jared felt the best and he asked them to run for 3 more hours. Embry and Sam would sleep and relieve them then. As soon as Jacob hit the tree line in his backyard, he phased back and ran toward the house. In the living room, he saw Seth and Bella asleep on the couch. The televisio was still on replaying some kitchen show Bella loved to watch. As Jacob stepped near the couch, Seth opened his eyes and looked at him. "Hey, man," Jacob greeted him. "I've got it. Get some rest, so you'll be ready to patrol at noon with Quill." Seth stood and nodded his understanding, walking out the front door. Jacob smiled at Bella's resting form. She was beautiful and the way her hair was all tangled up around her face made him want to gently brush it away for her. Instead, he bent and hoisted her body into his arms. He placed light kisses everywhere he could reach. Say, that feels good," Bella whimpered. But her lip cracked just enough of a smile that Jacob knew she was teasing him. He decided to continue what he was doing, making each kiss last a few seconds longer. Her heartbeat picked up, so it was quite clear she was awake. "Want to go to bed with me?" he whispered in her ear, trying to imitate Seth's voice. She shivered. "Of course, I do, lover." "Then you'd better never call me Seth again." He breathed into her ear. She burst into giggles at her joke, knowing she hadn't fooled him for a second. How do you know? She laughed. I'll never tell, he smiled. Sorry your birthday got ruined. You didn't ruin my birthday. So stop saying that. I don't want a big deal made about it. I promise. Can I give you my gifts now? I guess, she pouted. He placed her on the bed and looked at her pout face. It was funny, so he laughed. She continued to pout, so he bent down and placed a loving kiss on her lips. It soon turned heated and she'd wrapped her arms around his neck. When he leaned up, she finally got a good look at his body. Why are you filthy, Jacob? You look like you're covered in sawdust. Did you go to work and forget to clean up? She sat up in the bed to look at him fully, a puzzled look on her face. He looked away for a minute and decided her gifts were going to have to wait. I didn't go to work. We cut down some trees. You cut down trees. Why? Because Edward was looking onto the reservation from them. So you cut down the whole forest? Her question hanging in the air. Okay, I get it. I was rash. It was a hasty decision and there are a million other trees around here. But it was the trees that reeked of him. Trees that he must have been using for a while now. When the wolf smelled his, you know, I couldn't take it anymore. I ordered them to cut them down. Smelled his what? She asked, not getting it. His spunk. In the tree. He must have taken care of some business up there. Ew. Jake. That's just. Ew. Why do you think he did that? I don't know for certain. But remember the night we made up on the cliffs? I kept getting this feeling of being watched. But we were on the res, I was wrapped up in fixing things with you. It never occurred to me that he would have a perfect sight of that from the trees. Bella gasped. She felt violated. Damn Edward. He had tainted an amazing night for her. Now when she recalled that night she would think about how he was there, watching them. That he was. She couldn't even think the words of what he was doing. I'm going to go clean up and then I'll bring your gifts in here. Okay, Jacob asked her. She nodded her head and laid back down on the bed. The first gift Jacob had given Bella was a beautiful charm bracelet. It had silver links and several wooden charms hanging from it. Bella marveled at each one, surprised that he'd made them for her. She'd seen his crafting ability at work, but hadn't seen him do anything as tiny as these. The first was a wolf, baying into the air. It was intricate and beautiful. The second was a heart with JB and BS inscribed in the center. Last was a baby rattle. Bella had given him a thank you kiss to remember and asked him to put it on her. He assured her that he'd sealed them so she could wear it whenever she wanted. The second gift was a gift card for her iPad. It was something he thought she'd use so she could download any baby books she wanted, or music to listen to. The last gift Jacob carried in from the garage. It had been under a sheet and was too large to be wrapped. He put it in the bedroom and helped Bella lift the sheet. It was a rocking chair. Bella held her hands in front of her mouth and blinked back the tears. It was such a work of art. She couldn't believe how talented Jacob was. He walked around and hugged her. Honey, don't cry. If you hate it, I'll make you something else. Jake, I don't hate it. I love it. It's perfect. I was picturing you sitting there holding the baby is all. She kissed him again and this time they let the kiss develop into something more. Jacob carried her back to their bed and he worked his frustrations out through her. It was almost lunchtime when they got out of bed to eat. I need to go over to Danny's and talk to the kids. I'm not happy about what Riker said last night. 1. It seemed like things were okay with him and now he's making comments like that. 2. I need to know more about Tommy's stepdad, Jacob said, as he crunched on some potato chips. Bella cut the sub she was making for them into smaller pieces. She put 1/4 of it on her plate and the rest on Jacob's. He thanked her as he grabbed the plates and put them on the other side of the breakfast bar. Do you want me to stay or go? Bella asked, breaking a chip, avoiding Jacob's eye. He turned to look at her and waited until she made eye contact. I want you to go. The kids like you. I don't know that they are old enough to understand everything that's happened, but they do know whether or not they like someone. They've both told me and Danny they like you. You know that Danny and I talk. We want what's best for the kids and things to go smoothly for them. Okay, I'm sorry for standing there like a deer caught in the headlights last night, she apologized. Don't apologize. Riker was in the wrong for what he said. But he's a kid, so he needs to be taught. I wanted to talk to him, but everybody pulled me away. It's not how I usually do things. I'll get a shower and get dressed, Bella said, dropping her paper plate into the trash and walking to the bedroom. Jacob watched her as she walked, enjoying the view of her backside as she swung it just a little extra for him knowing he was looking. An hour later, Jacob and Bella walked up the sidewalk to Danny's house. Jacob texted Danny earlier, so she knew they were coming. Leah sauntered out of the house, glaring at Bella. Bella decided she was sick of the other woman's crap. What is your problem, Leah? I don't even know you and you are rude to me for no reason. I have no more control over imprinting than you do over shifting, Bella said, keeping her tone surprisingly calm. My problem, Isabella, she sneered, is that you had a choice with imprinting. You chose to accept the imprint and ruin a family and a marriage. That is why I despise you and everything about you. Jacob stepped up to the woman, furious with her and sick of her attitude. Your attitude is not acceptable. You will not treat anyone from this pack that way anymore. Imprints and children are included in the pack. Do I make myself clear, Lee? He snapped, using the nickname she now despised. Yes, Jacob, she bit out and left. Hey, guys, sorry about that. She and I have been talking. She doesn't understand how I can be so understanding about all of this. It's hard for her. Unfortunately, I knew about all of this stuff before it happened, Danny said to them, as she stepped into the house, swinging the front door open. I don't think it's an excuse for her to be so rude to everyone else. Trying to get her to be more respectful. Obviously it isn't working yet. Jacob smiled as Hope came running to him. He grabbed her and swung her up in the air much to her delight. Daddy, she squealed. What are you doing here? We go to your house tomorrow, I thought. Mommy said tomorrow. Mommy told you right. I came to talk to Riker and you. I missed you both. Where's Rye at? He asked, giving her tickles and a kiss to her cheek. Riker, Jacob called out. In my room, Dad, he answered. Hope, we're going to talk to Riker for a bit. Then we'll talk with you. Okay, Jacob told her as he put her down. Jacob walked into Riker's room first. His son smiled as soon as he saw him, but his smile fell when his eyes landed on Bella. What's she doing here? He muttered. Riker, that's very mean. Why are you being that way all of a sudden? Jacob asked gently. Bella followed him into the room and both adults sat on the floor. Bella gently slid some of Riker's Legos over so she had room. Don't touch those. I had those arranged for my project. Riker shouted. I'm sorry. Bella apologized, looking down at the mess. Riker, that's not true. Jacob scolded him. You didn't have those arranged. You dumped the bucket right before we came in here. Riker crossed his arms and looked away. Bella bit back a smile. He looked exactly like she imagined Jacob would have at that age. He was being a stinker, but he was cute. Jacob pulled Riker onto his lap, giving him a hug that went unreturned. Talk to me, Rye, Jacob said softly, hugging his son and rocking him a bit in his lap, running his free hand up and down his shin. Ever since Miss Bella started staying at your house, Mommy's been crying a lot. I don't like it. I see that different people are staying in the guest room. Uncle Embry and Aunt Leah come over all of the time. Or sometimes, we have to sleep at Uncle Paul's and Aunt Rachel's. I miss having you and Mommy together every day, he confessed, and tears started down his little face. What did you think would happen if you were so mean to Bella? Jacob asked him. I hoped she would leave and that you would move back home, he whispered, feeling bad about his behavior. Oh, buddy, I wish you would have talked to me, or to Mommy. I am sorry that you've had to deal with all of that. You're so smart. We forget how much you see going on. Jacob kissed his head and rubbed his arm. Those people have all been coming here to help mommy out. I have Bella at my house and mommy needs an extra grown-up sometimes. Jacob realized there was so much his children couldn't know, and that made it all harder to understand. He didn't want them to have to face the fear of the real world. Frankly, he wished he didn't know what evils the world really held. I want you to know, Riker, Bella is going to stay. Daddy and Bella will be getting married. She's not going to leave because you want to be mean to her. But that's going to make it really hard for you guys to get along and do fun things together. Fun things? Like what? Well, didn't you go to the beach together this summer? Yeah, we built sandcastles and went to the tide pools, Riker said. I'm sure there will be more things for you guys to do. But Bella might not want to do things with you if you're not going to be nice to her. She's important to me. I would like if you guys could get along. Riker pushed up out of his dad's lap and knelt down in front of Bella. She smiled a small smile at him. He sucked in a breath before he reached out and hugged her. Her eyes darted over to Jacob and she hugged him back. Thanks, Riker, she said. I'm sorry, Bella, and you can call me Rye if you want, he told her. I promise I'm not going to turn into an evil stepmother, Rye. I love your dad very much. I love you and your sister too. I even love your mom. We're a family, Bella tried to reassure him. This wasn't really her area of expertise. Her parents had divorced, Charlie never dating, while Renee's string of boyfriends were paraded in front of her every weekend. The trio went out into the living room, where they joined Danny and Hope. The family talked and worked things out, discussing the children's worries and fears. The kids were unaware of Danny's kidnapping, and that made it difficult to explain why she had been so upset lately. She took time to reassure the kids that she was happy for Daddy and Bella. They decided this was the best time to share that Bella was going to be having a baby in February. Hope was really excited and said she wanted a baby sister. Riker didn't say much, but Jacob teased him and asked if he'd help change poopy diapers. Both kids made faces, to the humor of the adults in the room. Can we put a crib in my room for the baby when we stay at Mommy's house? Hope asked excitedly. Well, no, Hope, Jacob began. Bella will be the baby's mommy. So the baby will always stay at my house. Why? We spend 1 week with you and 1 week with Mommy. The baby will be my brother or sister, right? She asked, confused. You'll see how it works, Hope. Since Daddy and Bella will be married and living together, the baby will live with them, just like you did when Mommy and Daddy were married, Danny tried to explain to the young girl. HMPH. This stuff is confusing, Hope said, squishing her face up. Can I go play now? Of course, sweetie. Right after you give me a big hug and kiss. We're going to leave, but we'll be here for dinner tomorrow, Jacob said. The kids waved from the front porch as Bella and Jacob drove away. Do you mind if we take a short drive? Jacob asked. Bella told him she didn't and watched out the window as he drove through the reservation. She asked where they were when they pulled up in front of a little run-down house. I'll explain in a minute. He ran up to the front door, but didn't knock. He just stood there. Bella wondered what he was doing. Finally the door opened and a large native man stood at the door. Bella's eyes widened when she realized he looked strikingly similar to the other wolves. He had long black hair, broad shoulders, and looked like he'd spent his life in the gym. She continued watching as Jacob stuck out his hand to the man and introduced himself. They chatted for a minute and then Jacob came back to the truck. Shit, he said as he got in. Well, I think I know why Tommy's stepdad has been aggressive. It's not okay, but we're going to have to bring him in and tell him the legends. His name is John. I recognized him, but I don't know him that well. Do you think Tommy and his mom will be okay? Bella worried, glancing back at the house. They aren't home right now. John said they went to her parents' house for a few days. Do you believe him? She asked, thinking the worst. Jacob's mouth opened and closed a few times, but no words came out. He thought back over the conversation and tried to remember. Beer if there was anything to indicate a lie. Well, once he phases, I will know without a doubt, Jacob said, hoping the other man was telling the truth. He wasn't sure what he would do if they had a PS. Why Chodic Wolf on their hands on top of everything else? Instead of going back home, Jacob took Bella back to the beach. They walked hand in hand, talking about all kinds of things, mainly about their lives when they were young. Bella laughed hearing stories about Rachel and Rebecca, who kept his parents on their toes for years. Naturally, this led to stories about Jacob's mom, Sarah. He missed her tremendously and wished she was still a part of his life. Bella wrapped her arms around him, telling him how much she wished she could have met her. He was such a caring man, he must have had great role models growing up. As much as I'd like to stay out here forever, I really need to get back and run patrols. Check things out. Can you take me to Rachel and Paul's? Or Sam and Emily's? I don't want to sit at home with nothing to do. Bella asked him. How about Sam and Emily's? Paul is due to patrol with me. Sounds good. Let me check with Emily, she said, already sending Emily a text. She said Sam is sleeping. As long as that's fine with you. He's there in case something were to happen. It's fine. What are you girls going to do? He asked. You never know, Bella smiled. Jacob chuckled as he got out of the truck in Sam and Emily's yard. He walked around and met Bella on the other side. He put his hands on her hips and leaned down to kiss her goodbye. She tried to keep it chaste, but he wasn't having that. So, he ran his hands up her sides and back down until she finally gave in and gave him the kiss he wanted. You guys be careful, I'll pick you up in a few hours. Then we can stop and get something for dinner if you want. Jacob said, as his hand rubbed gently over her baby belly. It was getting a tad bigger each day and he was looking forward to it. In his opinion, pregnant women were beautiful. Maybe it was the commitment they were willing to make to a little human in their bellies, their bodies tormented in the process. It was a miracle to witness. He stood in front of the truck until Bella went in the house. Emily waving from the doorway. Then he drove back to his dad's house to meet up with Paul for patrols. Paul was waiting outside, dressed only in his gym shorts. They were quick to get on and off so they all had them. Together they walked into the trees talking about the prior evening's events. It was easy to run with each other now. When they were younger Paul's cocky attitude rubbed Jacob wrong. But they'd all matured since those days. They listened to Quill and Seth fill them in on their patrol. There hadn't been anything out of the ordinary. Jacob ran ahead of Paul, his wolf wanting to do a fast sweep of the entire area. He asked Quill and Seth to run a little longer with Paul so he wasn't left alone. When Jacob came to the south border near the highway, he noticed a car pulled off the side of the road. Suddenly, he recognized the scent. He started searching around. Where are you? He wondered. Jacob started running, calling his wolves to him. They were an orphan would take a few minutes to get to him. He could see Edward ahead of him pacing through the woods. On their land again. Hey, Sparkles, what in the fuck are you doing here? Jacob thought. No, the bastard could read people's thoughts. Edward didn't react. He didn't look around or try to rush away. Bastard. Tree spying. Piece of shit. I'm calling you. Come here so I can turn you to ash. Jacob noticed that Edward was getting closer to the road and there was no way he could follow him in wolf form. Come here so I can use your glittery confetti at mine and Bella's wedding. How about I see? Hop off that popsicle dick of yours so you can't stand in the forest and beat off to me having the best sex of my life. You stay away from here. He screamed in his mind as Edward ran from the tree line to the car and drove away. Paul, Seth and Quill trotted up to him. They were all surprised that Edward didn't react to Jacob's thoughts. What the hell? Quill asked, standing in human form. He jogged out to the road and searched around for clues. There was nothing. This is pissing me off that he is walking here like he's welcome any time, Seth said, shaking his head at the audacity of the vampire. Jacob stood in wolf form staring after the car, trying to put the puzzle pieces together. Edward didn't seem to know a wolf was coming up on him during the bonfire. He should have been able to hear th.ir thoughts coming at him and either hid better or left. But he had been surprised. Now it seemed Edward didn't know he was there in the woods with him. Jacob was sure he would have taken off like the little prick he was if he knew that the wolves were there. They all ran a fast loop around the res, making sure Edward wasn't making an attempt to enter another way. After 2 laps, Jacob began to let his thoughts and memories of meeting John flow out to the others. They all hoped things were okay and agreed that he needed to know what was going on. They'd found with the other new wolves knowing what was happening to them made the transition a lot easier. They didn't fight the pain and were less stressed. He'd let Quill and Seth go so that they could sleep and pulled in Embry with Leah and 2 of the new wolves for patrol. It was a grueling schedule for everyone. It had to end soon and Edward showing up again was not a good sign. Jacob hated to think of the people that were in danger because of him. There were others of his kind for Edward to go have a life with. Why did he want Bella? When Paul and Jacob ended up behind Paul's house, Jacob told the others to howl out for him if they needed anything. They continued the serious conversation in human form as they walked toward the back of the house. Billy was in the kitchen, working on a crossword puzzle when they came in. "Gentlemen," he greeted them. "Dad." Jacob imitated his dad's tone. Billy just smiled. "So, Jacob, tell me what happened that I had to explain why several 100-foot-tall trees were suddenly chopped down last night. And, please tell me how anyone even bothered to notice around here." Jacob jumped into the whole story with Paul adding in here and there. By the time they were done, you'd think that a whole coven of vampires had made their homes in those trees and lived there for generations. We've fought the logging industry and people think that they came and chopped down those trees to just piss us off. I'm inclined to let people believe that to get them to care more about our environment, Billy sighed. But somehow people noticed those trees, so I need to come up with a valid reason. Just tell them somebody saw they were getting a disease that would kill lots of other trees. They were sacrificed for the good of the forest, Paul shrugged. That might be the only lame excuse I can come up with, Billy responded, leaving the table. Did he just insult me? Paul asked, pointing to Billy's back as he headed into the living room. Jacob shook his head and followed his dad. He wasn't done talking to him. He needed to let him know about John. It was going to be critical that they talked to him very soon. Jacob had to know his family really was okay. After talking to his dad, Jacob made one more pass by John's house. What Bella suggested was really getting on his nerves. Jacob parked in front of the house and luckily, John was in the garage on the phone. He was running his hand through his hair. "Honey, I'm so sorry. I'm glad you're there safe. I don't know what's wrong with me. I just feel angry all of the time now. You see how my body has changed. It's creepy. I haven't been going to the gym or anything unusual. None of my clothes fit. And I've grown several inches taller. I hit puberty 10 years ago. Why am I changing like this now?" Jacob listened carefully to both sides of the conversation and felt relief flood through him. It seemed that Tommy's mom was okay and that, for now, John was okay too. He drove on to Sam and Emily's to pick Bella up. His stomach growled loudly in the car. Bella saw him driving up, so she met him in the front yard, jumping into his arms. "Careful," Jacob reminded her. "It's fine, Jacob. My womb is a very safe place for our little pup," she giggled. "Your womb, huh? What have you girls been doing?" "Reading," she said excitedly. Jacob arched an eyebrow. Why was she so excited about reading? "We read What to Expect When You're Expecting." "Oh, a baby book. So what did you learn today?" he asked. "Lots of gross stuff, but I learned that I can still run and as long as I don't have any kind of falls the baby will be okay. And I learned that at my next doctor's appointment, if they do an ultrasound, we can see what the baby is." She kissed him quickly and pulled him by the hand into the house. There were 4 plates on the table, so he figured they were eating dinner with the Yulees. The smell of chicken casserole wafted to his nose and his stomach was looking forward to eating. Sam got up and greeted his alpha as he walked into the house. "I hope you're hungry. These girls have been working away in this kitchen," he smiled. "Starved," Jacob said, sitting at the seat Bella pointed at for him. The two couples chatted animatedly during dinner about the upcoming baby. Emily expressed her desire to keep trying. They hadn't had much success yet, but were hoping. After all of the stress of the last 24 hours, it was nice to put it aside for a little bit and enjoy an evening with friends. Bella and Jacob left a little late and headed back to their house. In the bedroom, Jacob whispered in Bella's ear, "I forgot to give you your last gift." He nibbled her ear lobe and pulled her body back against his. Thrusting himself against her, she flipped around to face him and kissed him passionately, their tongues sliding across each other and her arms wrapped tightly around his neck. His hands roamed her body, caressing every inch he could reach with her locked onto him. Jacob rolled onto his back, pulling Bella with him so that she was straddling his waist. In this position, she had to release her arms. Gently, he pushed her into a sitting-up position and pushed her nightgown up her body. She took the hit and pulled it off. He took advantage the moment her arms were up and put both hands on her swollen breasts. Knowing how sensitive to touch she was, he lightly palmed them and gently squeezed her nipples in the crease of his thumbs. Bella leaned her head back and moaned at the sensation, pushing herself down on him at the same time. This caused Jacob to moan as well. He reached down and pushed her panties to the side and thrust up into her in one quick motion. Slowly, she worked herself into a rhythm, him helping by holding her hips as they once again committed themselves to each other in the most personal way possible. Bella put her palms on Jacob's chest and leaned forward for a kiss. "Want to try another position?" She smiled. Some of her reading today hadn't been from a baby book at all. She and Emily at first were looking up most successful baby-making positions, which turned into most orgasmic positions instead. They giggled like teenagers looking together at the pictures on the internet. "Oh really?" he asked. "Like what?" She explained to him what she wanted him to do. It was a little awkward and embarrassing for her at first, but they both loved it. Jacob, being the man he was and part of a pack of thought-sharing wolves, knew exactly what this position was called. He didn't want to tease Bella about it yet, and he was in fact enjoying the view of her ass while she pumped herself on him. After they'd both climaxed, he pulled her body on top of his. He kissed her cheek as her head lay back onto his shoulder. His hands gently rubbed down her chest. "Good job, cowgirl," he whispered. She blushed a bright red. "Don't be embarrassed. I loved it. We can try anything you want. Just tell me," he assured her softly. It was sometimes hard to remember that she was a virgin until they met. "I've got something you'll love," he told her as he slid her off onto the bed and turned her on her side, lifting her leg and starting again. They were spooned up against each other and it was a slow, gentle position. But he was able to nibble her shoulder and kiss her neck, while rubbing her center at the same time. Her groan told him she did love it. "Happy birthday," he whispered. "This is the present I want every year," she smiled. Edward got the call Alice had prepared him for from Arrow. Of course, Arrow was furious that the shipment of beautiful, unattached young women had arrived with the stench of death in the container. He threatened the entire Cullen family if Edward did not arrive in Italy as soon as possible. He told Edward they would discuss the new terms upon his arrival in Volterra. When he hung up the call, Edward had to be careful not to destroy another phone. At the moment, he was riding in a hired car with the flight attendant from his chartered plane from Washington. He sat in silence, wondering how the wolves were shutting him out. It had only ever been Bella that could block his gift. He had been gifted for nearly 100 years and she was the only one whose thoughts were blissfully silent. Too bad the woman in the car couldn't shut her repulsive thoughts off. Edward was disgusted by all of the things she wanted to do with him, not that they were so gross, but that she was recalling things she had done with other clients. Really, had she no self-respect at all? As the driver pulled up to the curb of his apartment building, he received a text from Alice. He wasn't surprised, so he simply deleted the "No, Edward, don't do it." He paid the driver and tipped him decently, nothing too obvious. Then, he held his hand out to his passenger to assist her out of the car. A beautiful smile lit his face as she looked up at him, admiring his features. Once they crossed the threshold to his apartment, he grabbed her and pulled her close, kissing her along the pulse points on her neck. She leaned her head back, giving him better access. Having the ability to read a woman's thoughts in the throes of passion gave Edward an advantage over other men. He knew precisely what to do next and what to change to thrill the woman. She started to comment on the cold temperature of his body when he silenced her with a forceful kiss. Edward pumped into her body, imagining it was Bella that was writhing beneath him, crying out for him. As he came, he kissed down her neck and bit her soft flesh, sucking her warm, sweet blood from her body. He drained the life from her so quickly, she couldn't even scream for help. The limp body remained in his bed while he showered. He ignored it as he sat at his computer making arrangements for an international flight to Italy. Then, he walked over to his bed and folded the sheets and the woman into a heap. He managed to get the pile to the incinerator in the basement, without being seen, where he disposed of the evidence of his crime. Without looking back, or even feeling a bit of remorse, he raced up the stairs and packed a bag for Volterra. It wasn't going to be easy keeping information about Bella from Arrow. However, Edward realized that if he was going to ever be free of Arrow, he would have to find a way. Arrow had sent Victoria and her little coven after Edward when one little news story questioned how many women had gone missing recently in New York City. The annoying part was, some women had gone missing, but none of the ones they were talking about were women Edward had taken. He was meticulous, and if someone suspected him, he left or would have killed them. Mistakenly, he had gotten involved with Victoria and her friends. He thought they could help out with his shipments and find women more quickly. Turned out James and Laurent couldn't follow directions, and Victoria couldn't stop bitching about Bella. She had desired Edward from the moment she said, "Hello." Edward had seen her as an outlet to his endless desire. He couldn't further his relationship with Bella until she was a vampire. And he still cursed himself for waiting. Victoria had been a hellcat in bed. She was into all sorts of freaky things, and Edward had been educated in all sorts of new things. Their bodies were indestructible, and what would have been beyond painful for a human was quite pleasurable to them. Bella never suspected a thing, and they had continued their semi-secret sex for months before. Victoria began complaining about Edward not leaving the little tart. It all began to unravel when James and Laurent were draining more women than they were capturing for Arrow's sick little games. He was furious with them. They knew that Arrow was using Edward and how much he despised killing people. It was Arrow that had first laughed at Edward when reading his thoughts. Edward had gone too long without feeding and crossed paths with a beautiful young woman. She tried to fight his attack, and she cried as she thought about the young child at home with a neighbor while she ran out to get some milk. There was no going back though. He had nearly sucked her dry, and her last thought was of the child she loved so dearly who would now be an orphan. It was then that Edward had decided he would become a vegetarian. It was too painful to hear the thoughts of the people he fed from. Inside he fought the monster that he was. In his human life, he had been caring and compassionate for others. His family was moderately wealthy, and they firmly believed in helping those less fortunate. The shift to vampire was a difficult one for someone like him. Over the last century though, his heart slowly turned to the stone of which it was now comprised. Edward became too arrogant. He had underestimated the ruthlessness the Volturi leaders operated under. They found out he had revealed himself to a young woman. They were actually quite serious before Edward told her of his condition. When Edward had affirmed his vegetarian ways and reasons, Arrow called him unnatural and a waste of space. Then he decided Edward's gift was quite useful in selecting guinea pigs for his trials. The women Arrow collected were for various science experiments. Some were turned, some were left human. All were experimented on Are an array of projects too unethical for any lab funded by the government or any corporations. Arrow had agreed as long as Edward did as he asked, he could continue to live his sad, vegetarian life and pretend to be human. Carlyle had chastised Edward after the meeting and took him under his roof to help him maintain their vegetarian lifestyle. Carlyle was not privy to the agreement between Edward and Arrow. Edward would never let his friend know and couldn't disappoint him. They had moved away and left Edward's first love behind. He made Alice swear to never tell him anything about her. It was impossible to forget anything with his vampire memory, but he chose to block her out. After Edward showered, he grabbed the suitcase he had packed. He caught a cab to the airport and checked in for his flight. Before going through security, he stopped into the bathroom to put on the dark brown contacts to cover up his bright red irises. They wouldn't let him through without sunglasses and he was PR. Eddie sure the eyes would draw unwanted attention. He sailed through security, making sure that there wasn't any metal on his person. There would be no way to explain his body under X-ray. The long GHT gave Edward plenty of time to plan his meeting in Volterra. The most important things were to get in and out and above all not to touch Arrow. He planned a number of different strategies to keep from touching him. It was futile though. When Edward walked into the huge room, he listened to the thoughts of each person. Some were bored and some were looking forward to Arrow's plan. They smiled at him, picturing what he would look like writhing on the floor begging for his life. Arrow rushed right up to him and grasped his hand without his permission. He didn't give Edward a moment to implement a single avoidance tactic. "Oh, Edward," he clucked his tongue. "Did you really think you could hide anything from me? Why, that's absurd. Ooh, your Isabella is a true beauty and she shields you. How interesting. This is something I would love to know much more about. Though you think you were going to hide her from me. Tisk, tisk," he clicked again. "Now you get to stay here, while we go get her and those disgusting dogs. Marcus, Keys, there are werewolves living in Washington. Can you believe it?" Arrow turned away from Edward, giving a silent signal to his guard. They dragged Edward out of the room, screaming in protest. Arrow simply shrugged and finished telling the other two about the woman they would capture and use for experiments. Then they discussed how there could possibly be a woman living with werewolves. It didn't make sense. They were horrific, uncontrollable creatures. Jacob received a disturbing call from Rosalie Cullen. He hadn't heard one word from her since she showed up that day in the woods. Alice had a complete meltdown, which was surprising to all that witnessed it because they didn't know vampires could have such episodes. Rosalie let Jacob know what all Edward had been up to in his recent trip to Italy. It turned out that when he got there, Arrow was not pleased with him at all. Unfortunately, for the Cullen family, Edward was being kept as one of Arrow's new experiments. All of Edward's secrets were out though, and that included Bella. She was now their #1 priority experiment to find the woman who could block Edward's gift. They needed to know what other gifts she could block, how it worked and if they could copy that gift for other vampires. Alice had seen that after they finished experimenting on her human body, they would drain as much of her blood as they could without killing her and change her. This had caused her to flip out, shrieking and screaming in the middle of the living room. The Cullen family insisted on Alice's full disclosure of Edward's past, present and future. They were stunned at the things Edward had been keeping from them. Rosalie left a lot of things out, but she tried to assure Jacob that it mattered to her that Bella remained human. She hadn't been given that choice and she would protect Bella's choice. Rosalie ended up begging Jacob to promise he would take care of Bella when he refused to promise that he would flee La Push with her. The last words before she hung up were to be afraid of the vampires that were coming, and that Carlyle would be in contact with him. It was hard to speak after that call. While speaking to Rosalie on the phone, he had been in full alpha mode. It was a side of him that handled things without too much conscious thought. It was automatic. But now that he was sitting at his desk, furniture orders and utility bills no longer mattered. His entire tribe was now in danger. He dropped the papers from his hands and walked out. After glancing around the showroom, he caught Paul's eye. Paul rushed over and asked Jacob what was wrong. "Do we have customers in here right now?" Jacob asked stiffly. "No, let's close up. Tell whoever's working that we're going to be closed for a while. We'll keep paying them for the next 2 weeks. Then we'll get back with them." "What are you talking about, Jake? We can't afford to close up and pay people." Paul scowled at him. "We need to have a meeting. Start making calls. Everyone comes. My house as soon as possible." Jacob left out the back door. Paul stared after Jacob, not having moved. Finally, he got his ass in gear and started rushing around closing up the shop. The only person working that knew what was up was Kim, and she rushed out the door, not looking back. The other members of their light crew believed a few lies that Jacob was having a family emergency before they grabbed their things and left, looking somber. As soon as Paul locked up, he hopped in his car and drove home for Rachel, Will and Billy. He called them on the way home and they were awaiting his arrival. Paul took the longest to get to Jacob's. Since it was Sunday, those who worked during a standard work week were able to get there quickly. He glanced around the room, everyone silent and somber looking. Riker and Hope invited all of the kids to play in their bedrooms, and all of the kids big enough to play without supervision were sent off to play. Bella and Cobb sat at the front of the room with kitchen chairs sitting side by side. Bella rubbed her hands over her still barely there belly. Jacob cleared his throat before addressing the room. He looked around at the room full of people that he loved. His friends and family were here as well as the tribal elders. He thought about his unborn child growing in Bella's stomach, as well as his ex-wife, his son and his daughter. "I received a call today from Rosalie Cullen. You all know how much I dislike trusting the vampires. But I have no reason to dismiss what she told me today. Edward Cullen has had a plan to take Bella and turn her. He believes that she can help him hide from the vampire leaders called the Volturi. He got himself into a bad deal. Now they have him held hostage, but they know that Bella can block Edward's mind reading. They're desperate to have her. They plan on coming to get her. Last, they hate werewolves, which they think we are. The only noises that could be heard in the room were the faint talking and laughter coming from the children in the bedrooms playing." "What does that mean Bella blocks Edward?" Danny was the first to speak up. The alpha couple looked at her. Jacob patted her leg lightly, indicating he wanted her to explain. "Edward has the ability to read minds. He can hear any thought you have when you are within a few miles of him. He's had to fine-tune his gift over the years, especially when there are a lot of people around to hear your voice. But he could never read mine. I was silent to him." Bella made eye contact with all of the adults that were looking at her before looking at the floor. It wasn't easy to discuss her life with vampires to other people. Jacob added on, "Rosalie informed me that Edward was unable to hear our thoughts last time he was here. That's how Brady caught him in that tree, and how I walked upon him in the woods." "Do you think Bella is blocking us all?" Sam asked, staring at Bella wondering how she fit into all this. It was something they had all wondered, but never voiced. Murmurs danced around the room as they all considered this idea. They agreed it was a possibility. That would be an advantage over him at least. The only thing that would make him better than us is knowing we were coming, Quill acknowledged. Conversations filled the room as the wolves talked about how they would manage a possible attack of vampires. They knew they would need to train together and wondered how they were supposed to manage their human lives with the supernatural. Paul and Jacob would be free. Leah and Seth didn't have jobs as EY had to quit when they came home and turned into wolves. Jacob paced around the room, talking with the elders and the wolves. He looked around for Bella and found her staring out the window. He walked up behind her and could smell the tears leaking down her face. He wrapped his warm arms around her and placed his hands over hers. "We'll protect you. I'm sorry. I'll be here for you, honey," he whispered into her ear, placing a gentle kiss to her cheek. "Do you think it would be better if I just left? They wouldn't be able to find me, it sounds like," she asked softly. Absolutely not, Leah snapped. Jacob whirled around and glared at the woman. Do you think he could possibly function without his pregnant imprint? Does that make any sense at all? We would all be slaughtered without him. Bella looked at Leah, who was standing on the other side of the room. Her hands were fisted at her sides and she was obviously furious. Leah, Jacob scolded her. No, I will not back down. She cannot be selfish about this. Our entire tribe is at stake because of her, and if she leaves, we will all die. Danny jumped to their defense, but it was Embry who snatched her back. Whoa, girl, you don't go after a wolf like that, he called, as she fought against him. He was too strong for her and he quickly wrapped his arms around her chest and trapped her hands by her side. He whispered to her to slow down, he didn't want to hurt her. Bella is the least selfish person in this room, Leah. If anyone is selfish, it's you. You are doing everything you can to make everyone miserable. You shame me for not fighting. G for Jake against something neither of us could control. But you and I both see how much happier he is and how harmonious this pack is now. So if you want to be mad at someone, be mad at yourself. Yo, you should have accepted fate a long time ago. Why would you come back and still be pissed at Sam and Emily, especially now that you know the whole truth? Danny asked her, her voice coming down, almost to a whine. I had a life. I had a great life, away from here, if you all must know. Now I get to come back to this shit. Her hand flew out pointing to everyone in the room. Life as I knew it, is gone. To add to it, I get to have Sam's lovey-dovey. Emily is perfect. Montage play through my mind every time we're phased together. Leah screamed at her. Her voice calmed down and she took a deep breath. You say that you're happy for Jake and Bella. But, would this be as easy for you if you had to be in Jake's head listening to how much he adores and loves Bella? She stared pointedly at Danny and waited for a response. Danny flapped her arms a little, asking Embry silently to let go of her. He loosened his hold, but kept his hands on her hips. I can't even begin to imagine what that would feel like. This has been hard on me. Really hard. You all know that. Instead of walking around pissed at the world, I've been a mother to my children, a friend to my ex-husband, and a teacher to my students. My life continues to move on. She turned her head and smiled at Embry. Then she turned around and hugged him. He embraced her. Quickly, she let go of him. You guys have been such great friends to me and to each other. Now is the time to pull together and not start tearing into each other, Danny said. Jacob spoke up when Danny was done and announced patrol rotations and that he would give everyone Monday to get their schedules freed up. They would figure out what to do about money and bills later. Bella offered meals to anyone that wanted to stop by. Emily agreed to help her and stay with her as well. Embry stayed after everyone else left. He asked to speak with Jacob privately and Jacob agreed, walking out to the back porch. What's up, Embry? Well, what would you think if I asked Danny out on a date? He asked timidly, shuffling his feet and looking at the ground. When Jacob was silent for several minutes, Embry looked up to see him looking at him. I'd say, it would be fine with me. I'd also say she's already had her heart broken to imprinting though. I don't know that we're that serious or anything. I'm not even sure she'll say yes. I've just been thinking about it and wanted to clear it with you first. Danny makes her own choices now. If it doesn't affect the kids, I don't think my opinion matters anymore. If that's a risk she's willing to take. Embry reached out and shook his hand. Jacob tugged it a little and pulled his best friend into a hug. I love you, man, Jacob told him. Embry patted him hard on the back and stepped back, nodding before loping off to the woods. Jacob walked in to find Bella sitting on the couch, staring at the TV. It wasn't turned on, and he was sure, even if it was, she wouldn't be watching it. Her thoughts were far off, so he sat down beside her. His arm pulled her into his side and they sat in silence for a long time. When his legs started cramping from lack of movement, Jacob stood and grasped Bella's hands. He gently helped her to her feet and guided her to their bedroom. Bella started to get in bed fully dressed, and Jacob stopped her. He lifted her shirt and grazed his fingers lightly down her raised arms and down her sides to her waist. His fingers then traced along the front of her jeans. He unfastened her button and unzipped them, slipping his hands down the sides. Carefully, he pulled her jeans down, and when he got to her foot, she put her hands on his shoulders and lifted her foot. She repeated it when he did the same for the other leg. He placed a warm, moist kiss on her pooching stomach. He stood and turned her hips gently, so that she would turn around. He unclasped her bra and pulled it down her arms, tossing it on the rocking chair. Then he pulled her body into his and cupped his hands over her growing stomach. His hands rubbed over their baby. "I love you both, so much," he whispered. He kissed her shoulder before walking over to her dresser and pulling out a nightgown. He helped her into it and lifted the covers so she could get under. He became increasingly concerned when she didn't talk or say good night. "Bella, honey, talk to me," he begged. She kissed him instead, deeply, passionately. She climbed up him and tried to coax him into making love to her. He gently refused her. "As much as I want that, and believe me, I always want that, I really would like to know what you're thinking. I'm worried about you. You can't keep this all bottled in. It's not good for you and it's not good for the baby." She broke down sobbing. She laid on his chest and hugged him tightly while she cried. He stroked her back with his big palms, attempting to calm her. "This has been the craziest thing to happen to probably anyone, Jake. But, you know, I love you. I really do. We weren't planning to have a baby, but we are, and I'm so excited. Now, it could all be snatched away. What did we do to deserve this?" She cried out, shifting because her growing abdomen made it uncomfortable to lay that way. "Oh, honey, we didn't do anything. The pack has grown and we will be training to get prepared. Carlisle is supposed to call and we can strategize as well. Do you think he's trustworthy?" He asked her opinion, debating whether to accept anything from the doctor. "I really don't know, Jake. He's the one that concocted that story when I woke up with a broken back. But maybe Edward convinced him to do it. They could have changed me then. But he took me to the hospital. I'd say, at least listen to what he has to say. You don't have to do anything beyond that." "Okay, I'll talk to him. Now, let's try to get some sleep." Jacob turned to his side so he could spoon with Bella, pulling her up securely against his chest. Holding her close, he had hoped would help soothe the wolf in order to sleep. However, sleep was elusive that night for both of them. Neither slept much, nor did they talk about what was to come. They both had a ton of what-if scenarios running through their minds. Jacob strategizing how to attack a coven of ancient vampires, and Bella worrying what would happen to the baby with the stress, how the tribe could suffer if the wolves weren't prepared. She had left behind Edward and Alice's craziness in New York, or so she'd hoped. Looked like things were going to get even crazier. Time passed. In fact, it flew past, and some wondered if the dire warnings they received from the Cullen family were at all factual. Jacob trained with the pack until he was convinced they were lethal as a singular unit. There was no questioning his leadership anymore, and the wolves all looked up to him. There were a staggering number of wolves by Christmas time. All of the old journals had been translated at Jacob's insistence. The elders didn't have anything else to do and were terrified of the future. Not once in the past had there been a pack with 25 wolves. Slowly, they returned to work, except for Jacob. Bella was worried about the amount of time he spent training with the wolves. They trained in shifts, but he worked with all of them all day. He would be home for every meal with her, and she was never left alone. It was 2 days before Christmas, and Bella stood in the living room staring at the Christmas tree. Her baby bump had popped out finally, and there was no mistaking her pregnant state. She rubbed her hands over her belly, enjoying the feeling of the baby squirming around inside. "Daddy's coming home for dinner, isn't he? I feel him, too," she smiled, going into the kitchen to pull out the meatloaf she'd made for dinner. It wasn't uncommon for others to join them for breakfast or lunch, but at Bella's insistence no one came for dinner anymore. She couldn't keep up with 3 wolf-sized meals a day anymore. She plated dinner for him and whipped up the mashed potatoes with the hand mixer, scooping plenty for Jacob onto the plate. Her much smaller portion was dished onto her plate and she carried it over to the table. The whine of water running sounded and she knew Jacob was showering off in the backyard. Since they were renting, he couldn't make any changes to the house, so he'd constructed a hose shower behind the house. It wasn't for normal human beings because the water was ice cold. But it got 95% of the dirt off of Jacob before he came in. "I need a towel, honey," he called to her from the back door. She waddled her way to the linen closet and grabbed one for him. When she walked back to the door, he was holding it open, and her breath caught. He smiled at her and chuckled, knowing she was surprised he was butt naked in the backyard like that. She blushed a pretty pink before tossing the towel at his face. "What would the neighbors think, Jake?" she asked. "They shouldn't be able to see in our backyard, but I think they'd be happy to see such a fine male specimen." "You're incorrigible," she laughed. He stepped into the house and leaned down to place a kiss on her lips with the towel wrapped around his waist. Something smells delicious. I made Italian meatloaf for dinner. That smells good, too." He grinned at her. They sat down at the dinner table and ate together, talking over what had happened since they saw each other at lunchtime. "Do you have everything you need for Christmas?" Jacob asked Bella. "Yes, I finished shopping for everyone last week. Do we need anything else for the wedding?" he asked casually, as he scooped more food onto his plate. "I don't think so. We already bought what we're going to wear. Emily and Rachel are getting and making all of the food. We're good. Simple, easy, breezy," she answered, as she stirred around her food. "Good. I'm excited. I can't wait. You'll finally be Bella Black," he smiled. "I want my baby's mama to have our name." She blushed, and ran her hands over their baby. They decided at the ultrasound appointment to keep the gender a surprise. She constantly heard the wives and wolves betting on the birth date and gender. She'd quickly learned this was a fun pack ritual. They'd bet on anything from who could eat the most food at breakfast without getting sick to who could piss off Leah the fastest and make her snap and punch someone. Hope had begged Bella and Jacob to stay at Danny's house for Christmas Eve so that they could all be together for Christmas morning. Jacob made sure that Bella was comfortable before he approached Danny with the idea. She had agreed to the plan. They weren't a traditional divorced couple by any means. The entire pack lived each day as though it was their last, and things that would make others uncomfortable were done regardless. So, Christmas Eve morning, Jacob woke up before Bella. She was all wrapped up in the sheet and spread over her new body pillow. He suggested it after she started getting sore at night. His hand grazed her beautiful stomach. Some men did not enjoy the look of a pregnant woman. But he was not one of them. It was such a magnificent thing to see how a woman's body changed to create another human being. The stretch marks and swollen body parts didn't change how he felt. Battle scars, he decided. Battle, he sighed. He didn't want to think about that right now. Then he scooched down the bed and carefully lifted her nightshirt up and started placing warm kisses all over her stomach. She rolled back in her sleep, giving him better access. It was a good thing they had a king-sized bed because Bella and her pillows took up so much space. He continued to kiss down her rounded stomach until he reached her panty line. He kissed along that and across her front. Then he let a warm breath out over her mound. She groaned lightly and squirmed a little. He placed a kiss there before he crawled up the bed and held himself over her. "It's time to wake up, honey," he whispered. He laughed quietly when her face scrunched up and she turned her head away. He'd have to motivate her to wake up, and that was okay. Sounded like a plan. Jacob made his way back down the bed. Gently, he lifted one of her legs and waited. When she didn't stir, he carefully lifted the other leg. Then he settled himself between them. His fingers pulled her panties to the side. Bella called them her granny panties, since the big cotton undies were the only kind that felt comfortable. He blew on her freshly exposed skin, and when he didn't get a reaction, he leaned in and gave her a firm lick. She squirmed. He continued to kiss, lick and suck in all the ways he knew drove Bella crazy. At last, she opened her eyes and shifted her body to give Jacob better access. Since she was awake, he slipped her panties down her legs and spread her wide. At first she thought she was having a really good dream. But she realized it was an awesome reality. "Good morning," she moaned, as she writhed beneath him. Jacob didn't answer her verbally, he simply continued to lap at her, making her go crazy. She laid panting on the bed, thinking that was a great wake-up call. "Want to take a shower with me?" he asked, getting out of bed. She stared at his ass. It was perfect in so many ways. Firm, round and connected to strong, muscular legs. She loved to watch him walk as his muscles flexed. He cleared his throat and she gave a little laugh, before climbing out of bed. Jacob started the show. "W'er and let Bella step in before him when the water warmed up." He watched the water run down her body as she got her hair wet. Her hair had grown so fast since she got pregnant, and she talked about cutting it short. Jacob had convinced her to cut it below her shoulders. It was more manageable but was still long. With her arms over her head, her breasts bounced before him. He knelt down so that he could wrap his mouth around her darkening nipple. She squealed in shock at his surprise attack. He only suckled harder. "Be careful, you might get more than you bargained for," she warned. She knew that her breasts were preparing for the baby, as she'd already started leaking a little. "Nah, your turn," she said, pushing him away and directing him to the water. Jacob put his face into the water and his head forward, letting the warm water drain down his back. Bella's fingers traced it down between his firm backside and ran her palms down his thighs and back up between his legs. She let one hand reach up and cup him in her palm. He moved his legs apart for her and she carefully caressed him. When Jacob could no longer take her gentle torture, he turned around and kissed her passionately. He sucked her tongue into his mouth and pulled her as close to his body as he could. She continued what she'd started now that she had better access to him. Jacob put his open hands on the wall behind her, effectively trapping her in a cage of his body. She wasn't concerned with anything other than giving him equal pleasure. Once Jacob was able to calm himself and press down the wolf that was rearing up for a rough fuck in the shower, he closed his eyes and enjoyed the feel of Bella. Her hands worked a sensational rhythm, and just as he was there, she reached up and lightly bit his neck. The wolf loved it and so did Jacob. He caught his breath and then lovingly washed her body with the body wash and puff she left in the shower. It took them a little less than an hour to finish getting ready to leave the house. They had plans to stop at each of the packs, families to exchange gifts, and then they would end their night with Danny and the kids. Bella stood at the closet, showing Jacob which bags she needed him to pack in their truck. Then she went into the kitchen and showed him the boxes of cookie tins he needed to get as well. They drove off to see the single wolves first, so they could all get to sleep for the day. The younger men had decided they would take the Christmas Eve and Christmas Day shifts so that the guys with kids could stay home with their kids. Jacob wanted to personally thank each one of them, and Bella wanted to make sure their days were special as well. That's why she'd spent hours in the kitchen making batch after batch of Christmas cookies. It was a tradition she missed after spending years with the Cullens. Alice tried to help one year. The cookies had looked like a magazine layout and for some reason it annoyed Bella. Not everything had to be just so. She let them sit on the white-footed platter until Emmett said they smelled weird before she dropped them in the trash can. After that, Bella didn't make them again. Until this year, she and Emily at looking through cookbooks and online pictures to decide what they wanted to make. They'd selected a few different kinds but kept it simple. Chocolate chunk, M&M and gingerbread cutouts made the final cut. Bella purposely messed up the icing on the cutouts so that none of them were perfect. Their first stop was at Embry's house. He opened the door to let them in the house. Bella glanced around the sparse living room before holding out the tin of cookies for Embry. "I made you some Christmas cookies. They smell good," he said, opening the lid right away. He made an odd face and picked up a gingerbread-shaped cookie. It had little candy eyeballs on its face, but they were cross-eyed. Does he need glasses? Bella laughed. Nope. He's perfect just like that. Embry shrugged and bit the head off first. Tastes fine. They sat down on Embry's couch and chatted with him for a bit. Jacob leaned back in the couch and saw something pink catch his eye. He reached down and pinched the fabric that was sticking out. He pulled out a pair of lacy passion pink panties and held them up. Embry and Bella's faces were matching reds. Oh my gosh. Embry call. Bella called out, evident shock in her voice. You had sex on this couch and now I'm sitting on it. She jumped up and brushed off her butt, like she could wipe the cooties off. I didn't have sex on the couch, Bella. We just made out there. The sex was in the bedroom, he spilled. Realizing all too soon, he'd said too much. Oh my goodness. Tracy is going to die when she sees you guys again. Jacob stood up and laughed. It was an unfortunate reality that the wolves could sense sex in each other's houses. They had to get used to it and didn't want to make the girls uncomfortable or it would impact their own sex lives. I think it's time for us to get moving, Embry. Thanks so much for taking a shift tonight. I feel good having you there with the younger guys. Jacob thanked him, shaking his hand firmly before ushering Bella out the door. She had been searching underneath the kitchen sink for who knows what. She buckled up and made a sound to indicate her disgust with Jacob's find. He doesn't even have any Lysol, she grimaced. Jacob didn't say a word about it as he drove her around to 10 other homes and they dropped off cookies and thanks. He was amazed at how well she had come to know each of the wolves and talked to them about their lives outside of being shape-shifting wolves. There were a lot of things he knew about each of the wolves, but with so many of them now, he had to shut them out or he'd go crazy with the constant stream. They were all able to better contain their thoughts as well. Some things still got through and big secrets didn't really exist, but the 24/7 shared thought stream was gone. In the beginning, Bella had been timid and unsure of her place in the pack. She wasn't sure how to find her own footing. She had confessed to Jacob at one time she felt like she was replacing Danny and she wasn't like the other woman at all. Jacob assured her that she should be herself and find her own way. It took some time, but she had done it and then some. Seth and Leah were the next stop and Bella told Jacob they drove to the Clearwater house that she still didn't get along with Leah. He promised that everything would be civil or he would step in. So with a calming breath, Bella got out with 2 more cookie tins. She was relieved when Seth opened the door and invited them in. They talked about Seth's house in Montana. He still had been unable to sell the home and land he had bought when he left La Push. Leah sauntered into the kitchen with a smile plastered on her face. She knew when to behave herself and this was one of those times. Politely thanking Bella for the cookies, she took the tin outside. With her and unceremoniously dumped it in the garbage can before walking away from the house altogether. Seth and Jacob had both heard the thump in the trash can but decided it was one of those kinds of secrets that were okay to keep. Seth thanked Bella for the cookies and he opened them. He, too, made a puzzled face as he pulled out a cookie, holding it up for the others to see. Right between gingerbread cookies' legs were 2 black dots and a straight black line. Bella laughed. That was a funny one. She accidentally shot one of the black dots out of the icing bag and decided it would be funny to equip that cookie with a wolf-style manhood. Seth gingerly set that one back in the box. He'd decided that one would be the first of Bella's cookies he'd turned down. Jacob thanked Seth and they headed out onto the driveway. Jacob waved and opened the driver's side door as Bella made her way around the front of the truck. Then she made a quick diversion and opened the trash can lid. She pulled out the tin Leah had thrown away and handed it to Seth. He held his head down and she said she didn't want good food to go to waste. When Bella sat down, she turned to see Jacob staring at her. You don't miss a thing, do you? He asked her, shaking his head. I figured it was something she would do. I kind of wanted her to see the cookie I made just for her. What was it? Jacob asked curiously. Leah pulled out her phone and swiped to the picture of the cookie that she made for Leah. Jacob started laughing the moment he saw it. It was perfect. The gingerbread cookie had been cut so that it was flipping the bird, and it was a gingerbread girl. She had managed to make a red circle with the line across the center and the word imprint inside. "You're funny," he chuckled. He took out his phone and sent Seth a text. "What did you tell him?" she asked, just to make sure Leah saw her cookie. They made their rounds and had only Emily and Sam's house, as well as Rachel and Paul's house left. They were expected at Danny's house in 2 hours, so that gave them some time with each family. Bella was closest to Emily, and she got along well with Rachel. Although, she realized that Danny and Rachel would always be best friends. Emily greeted them with a warm hug at the door when they rang the bell. Shish was now sporting a small bump of her own, and the women laughed when they bumped bellies. Emily led Hem into the living room where they sat and talked. Emily and Sam decided they would find out the gender of their baby, since Jacob and Bella were not. They couldn't take any more torture, as Emily called it, smiling. Jacob asked Emily if she had known about Bella's quirky cookies, and she laughed. Of course, she had known. She had helped her create the cookies, and they tossed around other ideas that wouldn't be possible with the tools they had. They'd also discussed the special ingredients they'd like to give some people. For example, the woman at the bridal shop they visited to look for Bella's dress. She looked right at Bella's growing abdomen and led her to a rack of off-white and colored dresses. Emily wanted to add a little bit of cotton shreds to that woman's cookie. They'd also had an odd run-in with a waitress when they went out to lunch. Since Bella had a wolf with her every minute, Seth had gone with them. The woman acted like they were out to seduce Seth. Emily said she wanted Ed to wrap a condom around one for that woman. The two burst into giggles at their antics, and Jacob stared, surprised to see a side of the women he hadn't before. Sam walked in and greeted them. "You better watch out, or these two will cook up some devious plans." The four remained in the living room, talking as though the looming threat did not exist. It was nice to have a day where there wasn't ending doom lingering around and tainting everything. They discussed things ranging from the best car seat brand, to a safe vehicle for a baby, to the surprising friendship of Charlie Swan and Billy Black. The two had decided to go on a fishing expedition for Christmas to Florida. Charlie had found a fishing boat that would accommodate Billy's wheelchair, and they'd talked about nothing but saltwater fishing for a solid month. Bella told Emily they would see each other soon, as they left to go over to Rachel and Paul's house. No one was waiting at the door to greet them when they rang, so Jacob twisted the knob and called into the house. "Uncle Jake." Will's small voice answered. Jacob followed the voice to his nephew's bedroom and picked him up. "Hey, Will, did you just wake up from your nap?" Jacob asked him, running his hand over his back as he cuddled the boy to his chest. He didn't make a move to leave the room. Bella looked at him quizzically and asked where they were. Jacob held one finger to his lips in a shushing motion. It was only a minute later that Paul greeted them, his hair a complete wreck. Bella's eyebrows pulled down in contemplation. "Hey, guys, didn't realize you were here already. Did you ring the doorbell or just walk right on in?" he asked, chuckling nervously. Bella thought it was quite unlike him, but as usual Jacob knew exactly what had been going on. Not at first, but as soon as he walked into Will's room and heard his sister's moan and his brother-in-law's grunting. "Oh, we rang the bell a couple of times. I knocked too." "Nice and loud," Jacob confirmed, handing his nephew over. They walked out into the living room and Rachel came out looking flushed, smoothing her clothes down. "Hey, Merry Christmas," she sang out happily. She glanced around nervously, avoiding eye contact. She knew her brother had pretty much caught them in the act and she was thoroughly embarrassed. Paul had been so busy lately between training and running the store without Jacob, they hadn't been as close as usual. When Will went down for a nap, they got right down to business in the bedroom. Bella hugged her tightly, but Jacob just waved from a few feet away. He wasn't going to touch her when she reeked of sex. Bella grabbed the tin of cookies she had left on the table by the front door and handed it to Paul. She knew he would be the first to open them and start eating. Jacob wondered what special cookies Bella would make for Paul and Rachel, but Paul didn't react at all and pulled one out and started eating it. He looked at Jacob wondering why he was staring at him. What? They're good. She makes good cookies. Rachel peered into the tin, looking perplexed, and she started laughing out loud. Will came running. What, Mama? He asked. Paul, still oblivious, held the box down so Will could see. Babies. Lots of babies. He smiled, reaching out to take one of the much smaller gingerbread cookies. The adults laughed. Paul thought it was pretty ironic that she would bring those cookies. Did she know something he didn't? He looked at Rachel, who avoided making eye contact and instead offered to make everyone a mug of hot chocolate. Bella and Jacob left the house feeling exhausted. They drove the short distance to Danny's house and were soon greeted by two happy, squealing children. Daddy, Bella, they cheered. Bella guided them in the house so that they wouldn't discover the gifts still in the back of the truck as Jacob grabbed their bags and closed the lift gate. Jared and Kim were in the family room watching the news. Since Jared had Danny duty, as he called it, Kim came with him and brought popcorn for the kids to string. They had never done it before and they worked hard on getting it done. Kim had to keep slapping Jared's hand or he would have eaten all of the popcorn. They gathered their children and their things soon after the Alpha's arrival. They had plans to go see Kim's family and were headed to their house. It took a long time to get the kids to settle down for bed that night. They were ecstatic for Christmas like all children, but more than that, their mom and dad would be there in the morning. The family had built some fun traditions in over the years, and the best one in the children's opinion was the fancy pancake breakfast. After the gifts were opened, they would make big pancakes and the kids could put on whatever toppings they wanted and could find. Then as they were eating, they each talked about one of the things they were most grateful for that Christmas. Hope was too young to have really understood the meaning in past years, but this year, she knew it was a fun time of year. Riker reminded her of everything. Danny sat in the recliner, holding a mug of hot tea in her hands. Even though she slept a little better having a wolf in the house every night, she still had nightmares of being snatched by a vampire. It still didn't feel outside the realm of possibilities since they knew Edward was still out there after Bella. Bella and Jacob sat on the couch. They were respectful of Danny and kept a comfortable distance from each other. So what do you think of Tracy? Bella asked. She's nice. Embry isn't too serious about her, he says. I'm glad he's found someone solid, Danny responded. Even if it's for now. Did Embry ever ask you out on a date? Jacob boldly asked. Her eyes darted away to the opposite side of the room. She laughed nervously. Yeah, I wasn't ready. I still don't think I'm ready to date anyone. Especially not a wolf. Maybe one day, but not yet. I hope he isn't holding out hope for me though. I understand. He asked me beforehand. I told him it was up to you. Thanks. I will in time. But now isn't that time. Let's get through one crisis at a time, you know. Do you want any of the cookies you guys brought? Danny asked, jumping up out of the chair, dropping the subject. Jacob moved to get up but Bella stayed him with her hand. She patted his knee and made her way up. Jacob gave her an extra boo street by pushing her bottom off the couch with his hand. Then she followed Danny into the kitchen and waited until the other woman opened the cookie tin. There were a variety of cookies inside, but laying G on top was an envelope with Danny's name written on it. These are beautiful, Bella, she complimented her. She looked at the chocolate chunks, and knew the kids would devour the M&M cookies. Then she looked closer at the gingerbreads. She wasn't sure, but it looked like two of them were hugging. Bella walked forward and leaned on the counter across from the other woman. She gestured to the envelope and told her she should open it. Danny reached out for her reading glasses and sat on the stool to read the letter from Bella. It took only a few minutes for both of the women to be in tears, and Jacob came into the room wondering what had transpired to make them cry. They were getting out cookies. Were those onion cookies? He asked jokingly. When neither woman laughed, he asked what was wrong. Danny walked around the counter and hugged Bella. They held each other crying. Okay. I can't take it. Tell me what's wrong, Jacob commanded them as if they were his wolves. I promise, Danny whispered in Bella's ear, before pulling back. Jake, it's chick stuff, don't worry about it. Why don't you have some of these delicious cookies? I'll let it go for now, he conceded. But I've had a lot of those cookies already. I don't want any more tonight. Let's check on the kids and see if they're asleep. Then we can put the gifts under the tree. Danny checked on Riker and Jacob checked on Hope, while Bella filled their stockings with a bag of things Danny had hidden in her room. Then, the parents pulled the gifts they had purchased out of the truck and hiding places in the house and worked together to arrange everything under the tree. When they were done, they all stepped back, admiring their work. Jacob stood between the two women and wrapped his arms around their shoulders. He squeezed them both lightly, thinking he was very lucky to have had Danny in his life, but more so her understanding when he wasn't sure he could have gifted her with the same. Then he thought about Bella, how she balanced him. He had never had to be a fierce warrior when he phased the first time around. The imprint bound them together in ways he never imagined. Merry Christmas, Bella said. She wrapped her arm around Jacob's waist and patted Danny's back. Everyone headed toward their respective bedrooms for the night. They knew the kids would be awake really early in the morning and they should at least lay down to rest. Though, all were resting. None of them were sleeping. Jacob with his supernatural senses could hear all of the heartbeats in the house. The kids were slow and restful. He chuckled realizing he hadn't really needed to check on Hope, but he wanted to sneak in another kiss while she was sleeping. Danny's heartbeat was between restful and awake, but Bella's was fluttering away as if she were doing laundry or cooking. Talk to me, Jacob told her, turning to cuddle up next to her. Can I help you get comfortable somehow? The guest bed was only a queen and they didn't have the space they were used to. I'm fine that way, just thinking. Worrying, really. Tell me what's on your mind. Maybe I can help. I was thinking, what if this was our last Christmas together? He could smell the salty tears that were cresting over her eyelids. I wish I could say I knew it would be our first of many. But I don't like making promises I'm not sure I can keep, he told her honestly. So I say, let's make the best of it and have the best Christmas we've ever had in our lives. Thank you so much for coming here for my kids. You have no idea how much it means to me. Of course, Jake, I do know how much it means to you. You know how much I love the kids. Danny, she's just been one heck of a trooper. I hope one day when she's ready, she finds the right man. So, tell me about the letter you gave her. Bella sighed loudly. It was something she wanted to keep between her and Danny. But she knew her alpha wolf husband was used to knowing everything. If he didn't get it out of her, he'd probably go to Danny the next day. She'd rather he heard it from her. Can you hear me out? She asked, looking at him. Yes, I mean it, Jake. Let me finish the whole thing before you talk. You're going to freak out. She waited until he nodded his head to agree. Well, I've had a lot of time to think about all of this. I don't know what's coming and there's so much that is unknown about us, me and you. Like you, I don't trust any of the Cullens anymore. Maybe Rosalie, some, but she said she's only on my side because her choice was taken away. She didn't say it was because she thought I was a great person and she adored me. But, everyone thinks if I were to die that you would too. He grumbled at this point, but she gently kissed him and kept talking. I keep thinking, what if they're wrong? What if I die, but you don't? Anyway, I've also been thinking about what would happen if we both died and our baby survived. What would happen to our little one? So that's what the letter was about. I asked Danny to take care of you if there was ever a time I couldn't, and I asked her to take the baby if there came a time that we couldn't. It would be best for the baby to live with its brother and sister. Bella looked up nervously at Jacob. His face was ashen. Of course, Bella had thought of everything he had, but he had already had this conversation with Paul and Sam. He wanted to be sure Bella and the baby were cared for. Or if something happened to him and they survived. It wasn't something anyone wanted to plan for, yet all parents should have a plan for their children. They both cried quietly together, unsure of what the future would bring them. Finally, Jacob pulled himself together and told Bella that for Christmas, they'd put their worries aside. That if something were to happen to either of them, they had an entire pack that was willing to step up and care for them in any way that was needed. All too early the kids were awake and cheering that Santa had come. Hope bounced on the foot of the bed. "Daddy, Bella, time to wake up. There are presents. Come on, let's go," she laughed, bouncing and grabbing their feet. Groggily, both adults rolled out of bed and went into the living room. Danny walked out of the kitchen looking equally exhausted, but holding 2 mugs, one with coffee, she handed to Jacob and the other with warm apple cider for Bella. They thanked her and sat on the couch. The kids were walking around the tree pointing to different gifts and figuring out which ones belonged to each person. "Okay, choose one," Danny said. The kids each grabbed the gift they wanted to open first and spread apart to rip into them. "A scooter. Yes, just the one I wanted," Riker smiled, holding it up while his mom and dad each took a picture. "What did you open, Hope?" Bella asked her. She already had the package open and the baby doll laying in her arms. "It's the perfect baby," Hope said, rubbing its head roughly. Jacob reminded her that real babies needed a soft touch. Everyone enjoyed the happy morning. Kids had packages from their grandparents and aunts and uncles. There were a lot of practical things and some traditional gifts as well. Bella asked Jacob who made the wooden toys the kids got. He told her to guess. She thought it was him, since she had seen the magic he worked in the woodshop. "Nope, my dad. He taught me a lot of things." Bella and Jacob had given Danny a sweater and scarf set. Jacob said he had a couple other gifts for Bella at home, but he gave her a small box. She opened it and inside was a picture frame. It was a beautiful wedding frame and she leaned over to give him a chaste kiss. "One more gift," Bella smiled. She took the small box she had hidden in the tree and handed it to Danny. Danny opened the box and gushed over the gift. "I have the exact same one. I thought she was a way to show our commitment to this family, as unique as it is." Jacob stood up and leaned over Danny's shoulder. He had seen a lot of women with the circles on chains, but hadn't really taken the time to examine them. "What is it?" he asked. "It's called a floating locket. I put the same charms inside for both of us. It has the stones for each of the kids' birthdays, as well as a family charm. You can add to it if you want." "Thanks, Bella. This means a lot to me." Danny stood up and hugged her. "Okay, who's ready for pancakes?" The kids whooped before following them into the kitchen. Bella watched in amazement as the kids made what looked to be the grossest pancakes in history. Riker had taken a handful of cereal, chocolate syrup and then sprinkled chocolate chips on top. Hope had spread strawberry jam across hers, which didn't seem too bad until she added pineapple tidbits and banana slices. Bella took her plate and poured a small amount of maple syrup across hers before taking small bites. Jacob held up a bite for her, but she shook her head. "Pancakes with cheese and bacon. No way, you don't know what you're missing until you try it," he taunted. He did the airplane maneuver and put the fork in front of her mouth again. "Mommy says that you can't say you don't like something until you've had one bite," proclaimed Riker. Internally, Bella groaned. The kids were watching her and she knew if she refused, she could start a future trend. Begrudgingly, she opened her mouth and took the bite. She chewed it up and swallowed it. Yep, it was as disgusting as she thought it would be. She grabbed a glass of juice and gulped it down. Delicious," Jacob teased as he took another bite. After such a fun-filled day, Bella wasn't as ready to leave as she thought she would be. They hugged the kids and Danny telling them they would see them for the wedding ceremony on New Year's Eve. They trudged into their house and plopped on the couch. Jacob sat there for a while in silence before he got up and went into the garage. He told Bella to stay where she was and he'd be right back. When he came back in, he was carrying a large wrapped box. Bella chuckled because he'd used 3 different kinds of wrapping paper to cover it. She pulled the paper off and opened the box. Inside was a beautiful cradle. "Jacob," she gasped. He lifted it out of the box and put it on the floor so she could see it. It isn't mine. I had to buy it. I'm sorry, but I haven't had time to make things right now." "That's okay. I know our baby will love sleeping in there." He turned her around and kissed her. He growled a little before pushing his hands up her shirt. He rubbed his palms over her stomach. "Let's go to bed," she groaned and pulled his hand behind her. Bella was past the point of uncomfortable. Everything hurt. If she sneezed, coughed or laughed, she peed her pants. It was embarrassing. Her stomach was huge and covered in stretch marks. The doctor continued to assure the couple that things were fine. Bella was still due at the end of February. That was 6 weeks away. She stood in the kitchen, staring blankly into the pantry. How was she supposed to cook dinner when she didn't even feel like eating? She was hungry, but every meal seemed to give her heartburn. At that moment, she felt worse than she had so far. She was tired and achy all over. Poor Jacob continued to run himself ragged looking for Edward or the Volturi. Rosalie had taken to calling every Sunday to speak with Jacob and give him an update. Edward was still being tortured in Italy and his family wasn't sure if they could ever help him. Rosalie also said Alice hadn't seen any visions of the leaders yet. Carlyle and Esme had gone to Italy to see if they could help Edward. Bella finally grabbed a couple of boxes of macaroni and cheese. She grabbed a few other ingredients to spice it up and set to work making dinner for Jacob. He was worrying about her too and she wanted to somehow lessen the load. Just as she pulled the huge casserole dish from the oven, her back seized up. The casserole dish made it to the stove top just in time, as she cried out in pain. "Jacob," she yelled out. "Jacob, help me." Her hands were on the oven handle as she breathed deeply in and out, occasionally panting from the pain. "Jacob," she managed one last scream before she was on the floor crying. "Honey, what's going on?" Jacob screamed out as he ran into the house. "Bells, what's going on? Did you hurt yourself?" She gasped and tried to speak but the pain was too much. Jacob knelt down and rubbed his hand across her back. He listened to the baby's heartbeat and palmed Bella's large stomach. He could feel how tense it was and the baby's heartbeat was racing compared to its usual rhythm. "We need to go to the hospital," Jacob announced, as he picked her body up and headed to the truck. Thankfully the keys were laying on the counter with his cell phone. He texted Paul and told him Bella needed to go to the hospital. He set her carefully in the front seat, sliding it back and tilting it so she would be comfortable. He hopped in and drove her there, listening closely to the sounds of both the precious beings next to him. Upon arrival, he parked haphazardly and carried Bella into the main entrance. "My wife might be in labor, but something is wrong. She's in a lot of pain," he told the receptionist, who picked up a phone, calling a nurse out. The big doors swung open and an older nurse came out with a wheelchair. "Hi, I'm Leslie, what's the patient's name?" "Bella Black. She's not due for 6 weeks. But when I came home from work she was on the floor crying." "Bella, can you tell me what you're feeling?" "It hurts. All over, it hurts. I took dinner out of the oven and everything started burning and I couldn't stand up anymore." "Okay, well, we're going to check you out and we'll call your doctor." "Don't worry, I'm sure everything's fine." Jacob's hospital experience made him hate to be there and he knew Bella was feeling even more scared. She'd had broken bones that left her immobilized for a long time. Jacob remembered how he had suddenly healed after their imprint. He hoped that it helped Bella breeze through whatever was coming for her. The nurse steered Bella into a room as she moaned in pain. They managed to get her into the bed and Bella complained when she needed to put on a hospital gown. Jacob comforted her the best he could, helping her out of her clothes into the stiff gown. Thankfully, Leslie had the patience of a saint because Bella wasn't being her usual laid-back self. She was hooked up to a pulse oximeter, fetal heart monitor, blood pressure cuff, and then the nurse mentioned an IV and Bella really started getting pissy. When the monitor on her belly started to show regular contractions, Leslie stepped out to call the doctor. It looked like Bella was in labor after all. Leslie knew by the other woman's agitation there probably wasn't much time left before she delivered. To Bella it seemed like forever. But in reality it was 20 minutes before the doctor came into the room. He smiled warmly at Jacob and introduced himself to Bella. He asked how she was feeling, and when she glared at him and started asking him where he'd been and what took him so long, he looked over the long paper strip and quickly scrubbed his arms. It wasn't long before things were hopping in Bella's room. Dr. Scott had called back Leslie, but also called in the pediatric nurses. It was a small hospital, and if the baby needed intensive care, it would have to be transferred. Jacob watched as a cart was led in with a flat area and a big light on top of it. The nurses plugged it in and covered the flat part with blankets. The lamp was warm and he realized it was a crib of sorts. His attention returned to Bella when she growled at the nurse trying to insert an IV into her hand. Jacob jumped over and grabbed Bella's free hand. "Honey, are you ready? We're getting ready to meet our son or daughter." "Yeah." Cobb stroked her hair back and looked at her with bright eyes. He was excited and he knew underneath the fear Bella was too. "I'm right here. You're going to be fine. I won't let anything happen to you. I love you and I'm proud of you." "Jake, it's too soon. I must have done something wrong. I shouldn't have made such a heavy dish for dinner. This is all my fault." She started crying again. However, she hadn't noticed that the IV was now placed securely in her left hand. Leslie smiled and winked at Jacob as she dropped the other pieces in the trash can. "Okay, Bella, I need to check you and see how far along you are." "Ready, Dr. Scott asked. He was covered in blue scrubs, mask and hat. Bella gulped and laid back on the bed, trying to relax. "Bella and Jake, it's not going to be long at all. So, Bella, when you feel like pushing, you do what feels normal. I'll coach you if I need to." Bella felt the next contraction come on stronger than before and she pushed the feeling away. She took a deep breath and pushed again when the doctor gave her the cue. It didn't take more for Bella to push the baby out all of the way. "Well, Dad, what have we got?" Dr. Scott asked as he held the baby up for inspection before handing over the baby to the nurses at the warmer. "It's a boy. It's our son." Jacob smiled at Bella, tears coming down both their faces. He kissed Bella's face and then stood to look at his son. Jacob stayed back but noticed that the nurses were working quickly to get various things hooked up to him. He had tubes in his nose and little sensors all over his chest. Jacob couldn't believe how small he looked. He looked much smaller than Hope or Riker, but they had both been born full term. "Is everything okay?" Bella asked, looking over at him concerned. "Well, he's just not breathing as good on his own as we want him to," one of the nurse practitioners said. Somebody had stepped out of the room and Jacob could hear they were calling for a pediatrician to come to their room. Dr. Scott finished Bella with the delivery of her placenta and cleaned her up. The bed was reassembled so that she could lay down. She stared over at the baby, looking terrified. The pediatrician rushed in and started barking out orders to the people around him. It wasn't long before the baby was rushed out of the room. Bella sobbed. She hadn't even had a chance to see him before he was wheeled away. "Wait," Jacob called out down the hallway. He ran up to them and said he wanted a picture for his wife. He took out his cell phone and snapped a few pictures before they insisted they had to go. He turned Ned back into Bella's room and showed her his phone. "Go with him. I'm scared. Please go with him," she pleaded. "I will. As soon as someone can come sit with you, I'll go." Emily and Xander, one of the newer wolves, came in about 15 minutes later. They promised to stay with Bella and Jacob had reminded Xander that he could not fail in his protection. Xander just nodded in his usual serious manner. "Yeah." Cobb spoke with Leslie about catching up to the baby. He shook his head in astonishment as he walked away. They hadn't even decided on a name yet. They thought there would be more time, and Bella thought that once she saw the baby, she'd get a better idea on the name. She pointed him to the nursery, where he watched helplessly through the window. They were hooking him up to all kinds of machines and looking at his heart with what Jacob thought was an ultrasound. The doctors were pointing to something they saw. Another nurse walked to the phone, and Jacob heard only bits of the conversation over the din of the hospital. But helicopter and transport to another hospital rang out loud and clear. He stood frozen as he watched his tiny newborn son get packed into what looked like a plastic box. Finally, a nurse came out to tell him what was going on. She'd explained something about being a preemie and not breathing properly. The hospital was just a community hospital, and they didn't have the equipment for such a small, sick baby. Jacob had flinched when she said sick. Sick. He was sick. Where will he be going? He needs to be in the NICU. He's going to be flown to a hospital in Olympia. Jacob gasped. Are you sure there's nothing you can do to help him here? He asked. We've tried everything. We're just not equipped to handle it, she apologized. Jacob could hear the loud approach of the helicopter's rotors. It was a difficult decision to make, but he had to keep someone assigned to Bella while he followed their son to Olympia. Anything could happen, and he was going to be there. He walked back to Bella's room. As soon as he walked in, her head turned to him. He's going to be transferred to a hospital in Olympia. They don't have the equipment they need to help him breathe. They've stabilized him, but he's flying out by helicopter. The eyes of the adults in the room grew wide at the news. Bella tried to get out of bed, as they all jumped to stop her. Honey, no, you need to rest. Jacob gently pushed her back onto the bed. Emily reached out to grab her hand. Hey, you just had a baby. Let Jake go. He can watch him. Tell us his name, so Jake can tell the nurses when he gets there, Emily said, looking up with glistening eyes at Jacob. Jacob quickly glanced over to Bella. Bella's eyes searched Jacob's, nervous about what he would think of the name she wanted. Joseph Charles Black, she said, quietly. Jacob smiled and nodded. Little Joey, it is. Then, he leaned over and kissed her. Standing up, he told Xander to stay with Bella no matter what. That he was not to leave her alone for a moment until one of the other wolves relieved him. With the order given, Jake was out the door and running through the Olympic National Forest. His mind pushed his body harder. Bella called Ed, Paul and Rachel to let them know everything that was going on. Paul promised they would come with Billy to the hospital to see her, but she insisted they stay home. She had every intention of leaving as soon as she could. Her baby would not be alone. Emily tried to talk her out of it when she got off the phone, but Bella wouldn't listen to anything else. When Jacob reached the hospital, he realized he was there much too soon. There was no way he could have driven that fast. It was a 3-hour drive. He made some calls to the pack and to Bella. He thought she should stay in the hospital, but he assured him she would be okay as long as she could see Joseph. She hadn't even seen the baby for more than a glimpse. Jacob made sure she understood that she was not to go anywhere alone and that 2 wolves would make the drive with her. If she needed to use the bathroom, they were to check it and then guard it. Jacob got a quick meal in the cafeteria, devouring the food within a few minutes. Luckily, the place was deserted because he was sure that would have raised a few eyebrows. Finally, it seemed like a reasonable amount of time to show up to the hospital. If anyone asked, he would say he got a head start after one of the nurses told him what was going on. He found the front desk and told the older gentleman why he was there. Jacob swiped his driver's license and put on a sticker badge. He followed the man's directions to the NICU. There was a huge no cell phone sign hanging on the door, so before going in, he texted Paul to let him know. If there was an emergency, they were to call his cell twice in a row. The NICU was a locked unit and Jacob stared around at all of the signs posted by the door. It was pretty overwhelming. No sick people, wash hands, cover your clothing, no looking at other people's babies. At last, he found the small sign that said, for entry, Press button, state patient's name. He depressed the button and waited. A phone on the wall rang and he picked it up. Hello, who are you here to see? Joseph Black. What is the mother's name, please? Bella Black. He just arrived by helicopter from Forks Community. When the door buzzes, please go to pod 2. The nurse will meet you there. A loud buzzing was heard and Jacob swung the door open. His eyes searched for pod 2 and finally he saw a young woman waving toward him. He walked in her direction and told her what he was looking for. She introduced herself as Carrie, his son's nurse. Then she showed him the sink for scrubbing in and walked him over to the isolette. Jacob's heart broke just a little bit when he saw his tiny son laying on the bed. It was a lot like the plastic one that he had been put in Forks. The nurse pushed a button and the top lifted off. The tubes on his nose were gone, but instead there was a tube in his mouth. What's that for? Jacob asked, pointing to it. He's struggling to breathe on his own. So he's been intubated. Hopefully, he will get stronger soon and won't need it anymore. He also has a hole in his heart, so the oxygen is helping his body relax. He doesn't need to work too hard to breathe, the machine does the work for his tiny lungs. The cardiologist will assess him in the morning. Can I hold him? Not right now, but you can touch him. Preemies don't like to have their skin rubbed, so just hold your hand on his skin and talk to him. Carrie smiled and went about some other work, checking on the other babies that are around Joseph and talking to the other nurses. It was one of Jacob's worst nightmares come to life, well, except the other nightmares he was living because of Edward Cullen. After spending so much time in the hospital, he hated being in one. Especially in intensive care where there were so many machines and alarms constantly whirring and beeping. Stepping up to the bed, Jacob reached in and placed his hand gently on his son's small head. Hi buddy, you got a helicopter ride already. Your brother and sister are going to be so jealous that you got to go first. Mommy will be here soon. She misses you already. Let's get you better real fast so you can come home. Carrie walked back up with a chair for Jacob. She told him he could open the little arm holes on the front. But she was going to close the lid to make sure Joseph stayed warm. Once he told her his name, she always called him that. When she brought a little card with his name on it and put it on the top, he smiled. He felt his phone vibrating in his pocket, so he told Carrie he was going to step out to check on his wife. In the hall, he pulled his phone out of his pocket and saw there were a number of texts. Mostly, they were congratulations messages for them and get well soon for the baby. He texted Rachel and asked her to tell everybody what was going on. Then he called Xander. He filled Jacob in on the current situation. Bella had been released from the hospital, but they were headed home to pick up things they needed. She was getting a bag of clothes for everybody in the car seat. Xander said that Embry, Seth and Quill were all waiting there and would drive her to Olympia. Jacob thanked him for his help, and asked to talk to Bella. Hey, Bells, how are you feeling? You aren't sore, are you? Not too bad. I feel like I just had a baby. She laughed lightly at her joke. How's Joseph doing? Jacob filled her in on his condition and the cardiologist. She gasped a little bit at that news. Well, we're pulling in the driveway. Text me if you think of anything specific you want. Pushing the call button, Jacob had his hand on the phone as it rang. He repeated WH. Oh, he was there to see to the person on the other end and was buzzed back into the door. This time, he knew which way to go and scrubbed his arms off before returning to his chair. How's Mom doing? It's always hard on them when the baby leaves, Carrie asked Jacob. She's doing okay. She's on her way here, already got herself released from the hospital. They usually do, she smiled. It's motherhood. Hey, there's a nice little hotel across the street, not too expensive. Maybe you should go get a room for the night now before it gets too late. We're here all night and Mom is welcome anytime. Except, if there's a baby in the pod in distress. Then we don't allow visitors. That's a good idea. I'll hang here a while longer if you don't mind and then go over there. Do you know what time the office closes? I'm not sure but I believe midnight, she responded. Jacob sat back in the chair watching his son. He'd move his hands and feet every so often and Jacob couldn't help but put his hand back in and cradle his son's head. It fit so perfectly in the palm of his hand. He didn't move from that position until Carrie came over to let him know it was 11:30. He thanked her and stood up, telling Joseph he would be back soon. Since it was so late at night, Jacob had no problem running across the street to the hotel. It was a nice chain hotel and Jacob was glad it was right there. They were not going home until Joseph did. "Good evening, sir," the man at the counter greeted him. He smiled widely at Jacob. "How may I help you? My son is in the hospital across the street. I need to get a room for the night." "Oh, I'm sorry to hear that. I hope everything's okay. Let me see what we have available," Terrence said. Jacob glanced at his name tag. "I have a room with one double bed." Terrence's eyes ran over Jacob's form and shook his head. "That'll never work for you." Then he winked. Jacob cringed. This kind of thing never happened at home because he lived in such a small town. Everybody knew he was taken. "Actually, do you have 2 connecting rooms? My wife is coming into town with my friends and they will all need a place to stay tonight." "Sure. One is a king suite and the other has 2 double beds. We usually use it for parents with their children, so it should work perfectly for you." Jacob gave the man his credit card and driver's license. He typed all of the information into the computer and handed Jacob 2 envelopes with plastic swipe cards inside. "Thanks for your help. Have a good night," Jacob said, walking away to find the rooms and check them out. Jacob found the stairs and took them 2 at a time to the 3rd floor. He chuckled at the irony. Following the signs at the end of the stairwell, he found the rooms and went into each one, unlocking the door between them. The price was fair, and the rooms were both adequate for their needs. After opening the drapes, he saw they were facing the hospital. He couldn't see into the hospital, but he liked having a visual of it. Upon inspection of the bathroom, Jacob realized the king suite had an accessible shower, but no bathtub. That worked for him because the shower had extra space. He decided that getting cleaned up would help him await Bella's arrival. It would be the middle of the night by the time they got there. Jacob called the hospital and asked to speak to Joseph's nurse. He gave her his contact information and told her he was going to try to nap until his wife arrived. She said that if anything came up, she would call him right away. The white comforter was too thick for Jacob, so he pulled it off and tossed it over a chair. The thermostat said 65 degrees and Jacob figured it was plenty warm for him, but Bella would be freezing later. So he kicked the heat on and set it to 68. Sleep never came to Jacob as he lay in the bed staring at the ceiling. Supernatural hearing in a hotel really sucked. He could hear the TVs on around him, people talking on the phone and to each other, and worse, lovers and their noises. He tried putting pillows over his ears and then he worried he wouldn't hear his phone. Giving up, Jacob sat up in bed and turned the TV on. He channel surfed for a while, watching the local news and ridiculous reality shows. There weren't a lot of choices at this time of the night. He decided to call Bella and see how much longer she was going to be. She said they were within an hour's drive of the hospital and she was trying to get Embry to slow down a little bit. Of course she wanted to get there as quickly as possible, but she didn't want to have a heart attack in the process. Jacob chuckled. He knew how Embry drove. But he told his friend to be careful with his wife or else. An hour later, Jacob paced outside the hospital entrance. When he saw their truck pull up, he walked up to the door and opened it for Bella. He wrapped his arms around her and kissed her. "Hey, honey," he said sweetly, looking her over. She appeared to be okay, just tired. "Were you sleeping?" "Yeah, I was." "How's Joseph?" she asked. "He's doing good. He's adorable. He has brown hair like yours and his skin is a little lighter than mine. You're going to be in love as soon as you see him," he gushed. She smiled in return. "Hey guys, thanks for coming together." Jacob leaned in the window, grinning at his friends. They congratulated him on the new addition. Jacob reached in his back pocket and grabbed the 2 key cards for their room. He told them where to go and to put his and Bella's bags on the desk in the room. Quill offered to stay with them. Jacob told him to go get some rest because he thought they were pretty safe for the time being. They drove out of the car drop-off and over to the hotel. Jacob helped Bella to the desk. It was closed, but he knew the way to the NICU anyhow. He showed her where to go and how she could get in if she came without him. The phone rang and he once more announced his visit. He'd feel dumb, but there were plenty of people coming and going. Carrie met them and showed Bella how to properly wash her hands before revealing his son. Bella's eyes filled with tears and Carrie stepped back to let Jacob talk to her. Jacob pulled her body close to his. They reached down into the Olette and gently touched Joseph at the same time. They watched as his heartbeat stabilized and grinned at each other. "He's happy now that his mommy and daddy are here," she whispered, smiling down at her newest love. She didn't think it was possible to love someone so much after just meeting them. But it had happened twice in her life. "Mommy's here, Joseph. We're here. We love you." Bella and Jaco B stayed in the NICU until 4 in the morning or so. Another baby was in distress and they had to leave. It was just as well because Jacob didn't think he could pry Bella out of there with a crowbar. He was worried about her and wanted to make sure she rested. They walked back down to the entrance and started to cross the street. Jacob scooped Bella up into his arms and jogged with her to the hotel door. The lobby was closed, but his key card opened a side door. The room was comfortable and both parents were exhausted from the long day. They slipped into their sleep clothes and laid down. Jacob promised Bella that he would leave his cell phone on. Exhaustion took them both into a deep sleep. Jacob could hear a quiet debate in the room next door. The room darkening curtains left the room pitch black, but Jacob could see a sliver of light around the outside edges. It was at least after sunrise. Without stirring, he listened to the discussion between his pack mates. "There's a breakfast buffet until 9. But one of us needs to stay up here with them. So why doesn't Seth stay here, while we go eat first? Then he can go eat when we get back," Quill suggested. "No way, asshole. Then you guys will eat all of the food and I'll get nothing," Seth whined. "What if we bring you back a plate?" Embry offered. "You can all just go and shut up," Jacob finally said, just loud enough for them to hear. Embry peered into the room. "Sorry, dude. Let us know if you need us." The trio walked out in the hall talking about the buffet, wondering if the hotel could really fill them up. Seth talking about Belgian waffles was the last thing Jacob heard. "Everything okay?" Bella asked through a yawn. "The Three Stooges are going to the breakfast buffet." "Oh, they'll be there until they get kicked out," she laughed, thinking of how much the pack could eat. The staff would probably think they were starving since they were in such good shape. "When can we go back to see Joseph?" she asked, stretching out. "After you take a shower and eat breakfast," he answered her, kissing her forehead. "But I'll call now if you want and see how the rest of the night went." Bella got out of bed and went into the bathroom to get ready for the day. She looked at the bags under her eyes and muttered they looked like suitcases. When she pulled off her nightgown, she was surprised at how swollen her belly still looked. Her breasts were tender as well. In the warm shower, she leaned into the spray enjoying the feeling. Jacob stepped in close behind her without a word or a sound. Instead of jumping, she leaned back into him. "I'm on complete pelvic rest for 6 weeks, Jake. I can't do anything." She sounded disappointed. "It's okay, honey. I only wanted to be close to you." He kissed her shoulder and grabbed the bar of soap to wash up. Bridge. EAK fast was a quick affair for both of them. They were both anxious to get back to the NICU. Jacob had hoovered his breakfast and Bella only shook her head. She ate a little bit, but not enough according to Jacob. He grabbed a few granola bars from the hotel gift shop before they left. In daylight, the road was busier and they had to find the crosswalk to get to the other side. They signed in with the receptionist. getting their stickers before going upstairs. When they went into Joseph's pod, his new nurse greeted them and introduced herself. Her name was Clara. Jacob noted she looked quite like a grandmother and asked how long she worked in the NICU. She smiled widely and said, "Probably longer than you've been alive." She talked to them about his cardiologist appointment that would occur sometime that morning. The doctor was doing his rounds, but hadn't made it there yet. She thought he was looking a little jaundiced, so blood tests had been ordered and if needed fluorescent lights would be added to the isolate. Bella reached in and caressed her baby. She noticed that he was agitated when she rubbed his skin, so she just wrapped her fingers around his tiny hand instead. They stayed for hours awaiting the arrival of the doctor. Bella was leaning back in a chair when Clara gasped a bit. "Oh, Mrs. Black, I think your milk has come in. Have you pumped your milk? We have bottles we can store the milk in until he's ready to bottle feed." Bella and Jacob looked down at her shirt and saw 2 round wet spots. Bella groaned and covered them in embarrassment. Clara tried to comfort her and tell her it was only natural. She called one of the hospital lactation consultants to come show Bella the nursing room. The hospital had quality pumps set up for the mothers of NICU babies. Jacob tried to follow the women into the room, but the dark-skinned woman stopped him. "Oh no, sir. This room is for mothers only." She closed the door and he sat down right outside of it. Pulling out his phone, he texted Embry and asked him to bring a clean bra and shirt for Bella to wear. He said he'd explain later, but everything was fine. Embry called him about 10 minutes later and Jacob gave him directions to the area they were in. Just as Embry walked up to Jacob, the door pulled open and Bella smiled at Jacob. "Look, I did it," she exclaimed excitedly, holding up 2 small bottles with milk inside. Her face burned with embarrassment when she saw Embry staring at her. Quickly, she snapped her arms down over the wet shirt she was wearing. Embry reached out with the plastic bag of clothes and handed them to Jacob. And left without saying a thing, equally as embarrassed. Jacob laughed at his friend and handed the dry clothes to Bella. "Here, Em brought you dry clothes. I'll hold all that stuff." Jacob took a plastic bag from Bella and the 2 bottles of breast milk. Bella turned back into the room and was back in a few short minutes with her clean clothes on. "She gave me my own equipment to hook up to the machine. Although I'm going to have to rent one of those until I can feed Joseph." Bella held open the bag so Jacob could look inside. His eyebrows raised at the cone-shaped plastic and tubing in the bag. "Huh," was all he could say. They were able to re-enter the NICU without going through the buzzing door from the nursing room. It was designed so the nurses could check on the babies while mothers fed them. And also so mothers could express milk and bring it to the nurses. Clara clapped softly when Bella came back with bottles in hand. "This will be just the food he needs when he's ready. We'll put it in the fridge with these labels on it. If you'll put the date and the amount on each one, I'll show which place is his." The cardiologist came shortly after Bella and Jacob had returned from lunch. He was a down-to-earth kind of guy, explaining everything to them in a way they would understand. Joseph had a common preemie condition with a hole in his heart. They would try medication to close it, and if that didn't work, they would talk about surgery. As for his lungs, the tiny community hospital didn't have the medication they would normally give a preemie with in the first few hours of birth to help with his lungs. The doctor thought that after they were able to get his heart repaired, they could try letting Joseph breathe on his own with just the nasal cannula. He also warned that often preemies made strides and fallbacks. It seemed like it was always 2 steps forward and 1 step back. It didn't mean he wouldn't get well. The man shook their hands and left, examining other babies in the pod. The wolves traded out shifts with each other every day. They stood outside the hospital, looking for any sign of Cullen or the Volturi. Rose still hadn't heard from Carlisle or Esme, so she was worried about their well-being. Leah had come to the hospital and offered to go upstairs with Bella, while Jacob dealt with some business outside on the phone. Bella's eyebrows rose at the offer. surprised that Leah would be nice about anything. To her further surprise, Leah had softened at the sight of the little baby, hooked up to monitors and machines laying so helpless in a tiny bed. "He's beautiful, Bella, he really is," she'd said. "I can't get over how little he is. I don't think I've ever seen such a little guy." She leaned over the bed and started talking sweetly to the baby. Bella smiled down at him too. "I need to go pump. It's over here." Bella pointed toward the nursing room. Leah followed her in, and when Bella pulled out the attachments and lifted her shirt, Leah left the room. "Oh hell no," were the words Bella heard last out of her mouth. Bella shrugged and sat back in the rocker, letting the machine do its job. She glanced down at the little bottles and saw she was filling up the bottles. Joyfully, she turned the machine off and added 2 new bottles. She came back to the pod with 4 full bottles of milk. The nurse congratulated her on it, and Bella put them in Joseph's bin in the fridge. He still couldn't take a bottle by mouth, but he did have a feeding tube and they were using her milk to feed him. She was amazed that her body could provide the nourishment her son needed. Glancing around, Bella didn't see Leah anywhere. The hairs on her arms stood straight and she felt goosebumps cover her body. "I'll be right back," she told the nurse, stepping out into the hall. She was nervous about leaving the locked unit, but thought she would just peek around the hall a little. When she passed a door, it opened and she panicked as ice-cold hands grabbed her. A frozen hand was over her mouth, so she couldn't make any noise. Fighting as hard as she could, she tried to get away. The marble arms just closed tighter around her. "Love, please settle down, it's me. You'll hurt yourself." She squirmed even harder trying to get free. "Stop, now, Bella," he told her coldly. Fear struck in her heart so she did as he said. She knew he could crush her. "Now, you will walk with me calmly or I will make sure the ones watching the dog kill him. Do you understand, love?" She answered through the hand over her mouth. He slowly let go, testing to see if she would misbehave. "Good. Now, follow me and remember what I said." Edward led her down a hall and a hidden stairwell. Bella kept her head up and her eyes moving, analyzing everything to try to make an escape. She knew this was bad. They walked out what was surely some kind of employee door as she could see the loading docks. Carrie, Joseph's first nurse, was walking by. "You'd better be believable, Bella," he warned. "Mrs. Black, hi," she greeted her, looking warily at Edward. "How are you doing? How's Joseph? I haven't been back in his pod this week." Bella tried to take a calming breath. "Oh, he's doing okay. Waiting on the doctor to decide if he needs heart surgery." The nurse's eyes kept darting to Edward and back to Bella. "This is my brother, Edward. He was in town on business and wanted to see my son before he left. This is his black car." She gestured toward a car with darkly tinted windows. "He's leaving now." Bella tried to give the nurse some clues so that Jacob would know what happened to her. The black car was waiting at the bottom of the stairs and Edward pulled Bella into the backseat with him. "Drive, before the dog figures out where we are," he barked out. The car took off from its parking spot and whipped into traffic. "Where are the others?" Bella asked. "What others?" Edward asked her, looking at her innocently. "Oh, you thought I really had other vampires waiting to attack your husband?" "No, it's just us and Jane, here. She couldn't hurt a flea." He laughed a sinister laugh. Bella was freaking out inside. She didn't know what to do or how to get a hold of Jacob. She needed him to come save her. She couldn't die now, not after just having a baby. Curling up in a ball on the seat, Bella started to cry quietly. Her bag had been on the floor by Joseph's bed. She planned on going right back. So now she was without her cell phone or any identification. They pulled into a private airfield and Bella watched as Edward arranged a plane for them. Her eyes continued to dart around trying to find some way to escape or leave information for Jacob. "Where are we going?" Bella asked Jane, trying to sound as casual as possible. Jane wasn't fooled though. She scoffed. "We are going back to Italy. Master Arrow has demanded that Edward bring you to him." Bella's heartbeat doubled and Jane simply laughed at her fear. Edward returned to the car, having secured a small jet to take them to Seattle for the international flight. Bella silently cheered, knowing that without identification, she wouldn't be able to get on a flight out of the country. As if he could read her mind, Edward pulled a passport out of a bag. "Don't worry, love, I have everything you need, right here." Feeling even worse than before, she sat back and tried to keep positive. Once they had boarded the Seattle flight to New York, Bella noticed that her breasts were feeling very full. She asked Edward what time it was, and she realized it had been 4 hours since she pumped. She usually pumped every 3 to get herself ready for regular feedings. Staring out the window into the blue sky, Bella thought about her son and what would happen without her milk. Tears streamed down her face. Edward started sniffing the air. At first, Bella ignored him, but when he leaned closer to her, she could no longer pretend he wasn't there. "Bella, what is that awful smell?" he asked, turning his face, trying to pinpoint the odor. Glancing down, Bella saw that she had 2 quarter-sized circles on her shirt. "It's my milk, Edward. I needed to pump the milk an hour ago and didn't. It's going to come out whether I want it or not," she warned him. That's disgusting. What can you do about it?" He looked down at her with a look of disdain. "The only thing I can do is get the milk out, Edward," she snapped at him, completely pissed off. She turned away from him, her back to him, and stared out the window, hoping and praying that Jacob would be able to help her. She also prayed for little Joseph, the wonderful little son she was leaving behind. Meanwhile, Jacob was frantically searching for Bella. Quite by accident, he ran into Carrie in the hall. "Oh, Mr. Black, I just met your brother-in-law with your wife a little while ago downstairs." "My brother-in-law?" he asked. "Yes," she said. His name was Edward. His heart stopped at this news. No, Edward had gotten her. That is not her brother. "Tell me everything you can remember," he begged her. Listening to each detail, relieved that Bella had given him something to work with. Jacob had his pack mates meet up with him at the hotel so they could figure out what to do. Someone had to stay with Joseph, but Jacob couldn't stand the idea of leaving the search for Bella to someone else. There had to be some way to do this. "I'll stay here, Jake," Leah volunteered. "I promise I will take good care of him and I don't need as much sleep as somebody else. I can smell any vamps coming." Unsure, Jacob looked hard at her face. She didn't reveal anything that made him think she was being dishonest. Stonily, he nodded his head. Then he turned and started discussing what to do next. They all agreed he needed to call Rosalie. "Rosalie, it's Jacob. Edward has just taken Bella from the hospital," he told her, his voice low, trying to contain the tears. "That fucking bastard," she screamed on the other end. "We've got to go, Jacob. We've got to find Carlisle and Esme." "Alice, Alice." Jacob listened but there was no response from Alice. Where the hell did she go? Rosalie wondered. "Jacob, let me call you back. Jasper just walked in." She clicked the phone off, not giving Jacob a chance to say anything. He sat staring at the phone, willing it to ring and give him good information about his wife. The phone only rang half of a ring before he answered. "Tell me good news, Rosalie. If you want to call T good news, at least, know where they're going. Hope you guys can get a passport because we're going to Italy. Oh, and most of my family has gone insane. Please tell me what that means, Rose. I'm really upset here," Jacob growled out. Alice finally saw Bella and ran out of here squealing with excitement. Luckily, Jasper heard her blabbering on about meeting up with them in Volterra. "Esme and Carlisle are still Mia and my so-called brother has kidnapped a mother." "Where do we meet?" Jacob asked. "All business. Seattle. As soon as possible." Jacob and the other wolves thrashed through the Olympic forest at top speeds. Their thoughts were once again silent as they followed their leader back to La Push. If they were to go to Italy, they would need documentation and clothing. It didn't take them long to grab what they needed. Jacob hoped Rosalie would be able to do something about the lack of passports. They all hopped into Paul's truck. Jacob yelled out in frustration. "This will take too long. We need to run." They jumped back out and dashed into the forest. Quickly they changed and stowed their loose things into the backpacks and duffel bags they'd packed. Somehow they managed to secure it to each other's bodies. "I feel like a pack mule." Xander laughed mentally. The guys started to laugh, but Jacob closed all other thoughts out. He led them through the night to their destination SeaTac. Rosalie didn't waste time finding them in the airport. She'd already secured a private charter to get them to New York, where they'd take a commercial jet to Italy. Since she didn't know who was flying, she couldn't book them out of Seattle. It seemed like a week had passed, but in reality it was less than 24 hours before they touched down in Italy. 2 SUVs had been reserved for them and they piled in them, Rosalie in the first vehicle barking out directions. Emmett sat in the backseat, not saying a word. When they pulled up outside of Volterra, Rosalie spoke to Jacob about what they were getting ready to walk into. He prayed Bella would still be alive and unharmed. He thought of his 3 children back home and what would happen to them if he didn't survive. The macabre thoughts had to be pushed from the forefront of his mind. His focus was solely on getting Bella and getting the hell out of Dodge. Meanwhile, Bella was terrified. At first, she had been very relieved to see Carlisle and Esme. The father-like figure would help her escape, she was certain of it. "Edward, I knew you could do it. I told Arrow you would bring Bella back here. He was worried that you were too wishy-washy after the experiments we've been conducting. But I knew you would bring her back. You haven't failed me yet, have you?" Carlisle smiled. Edward stared frozen and Bella sucked in a cry, as she was horrified. "Carlisle, what do you mean? You've been behind the shipments?" Edward asked, looking confused. Bella tried to shrink into herself, hoping she would be invisible. "My experiments have required a lot of volunteers, and you've done so well at finding beautiful young women. I'd think that you would have recognized a few of them by now. But sadly, many of them didn't survive." Trying hard to be silent, Bella choked back the vomit in her throat. Carlisle was behind some kind of human experimenting. Could it be? "Oh, Edward," Carlisle chuckled, evilly. "All this time, I worried that I wouldn't be able to keep all of this from you. It seems that I did well. Now, I hope you don't mind, but I have plans for Bella. I've been waiting for her." Carlisle stepped closer to Bella's quivering body, attempting to hide herself behind Edward's body. Edward turned trying to block Bella. "That'll never do. Jane, can you please deal with Edward?" Carlisle watched as Jane paralyzed Edward again and he casually grabbed Bella. He held her out in front of him, making sure that none of the disgusting milk got on his clothes. There would be no way to get the smell off for a while. Bella started screaming at the top of her lungs. She knew it was a futile attempt, but she would do whatever she could to live for Jacob and Joseph. Her voice cracked when Carlisle reached his destination. It was a heavy metal door, like that of a vault at a bank. It creaked and popped as it opened and Carlisle entered the room. Alice was the first to bounce into the room and greet Bella. "Bella, I missed you so much. How are you?" She hugged her painfully hard. "Ugh, what did you get all over my silk blouse? You need a shower. You really stink," Alice noted, pulling Bella's hand along behind her. Bella glanced around looking for a shower, but realized she was in some kind of laboratory. Alice grabbed a triangle-shaped handle and cold water dumped down Bella's body. She screamed from the shock of it. "That's really cold. Oh my God, help me." Bella tried to run out of the shower, but she was met by Carlisle or Alice whichever way she went. "Jasper, guard her. I've got to get her out of those clothes and wash her. The smell of sour milk and dog is too much," Alice commanded. Jasper stepped out of a doorway and took Alice's spot. Bella crossed her arms in front of her chest, attempting to protect herself from Alice. It didn't help though, and Alice quickly tore the clothes off. Bella was shivering and naked in front of Carlisle, Alice and Jasper. She tried to cover herself with her arms. Jasp. Handed Alice a bottle and Alice squeezed a concoction into her hand. She briskly rubbed the soap all over Bella's freezing body. She screamed out a stream of profanities when Alice washed her. The vampire didn't leave one area of her skin untouched and Bella was left feeling violated. The tears soaked her face as she cried, not able to stop what was happening, praying that Jacob was able to somehow stop anything else from happening. Once Bella was washed and forcibly dried, Alice dragged her into a bedroom. Bella was astonished that the other woman didn't seem to notice that Bella was completely unhappy. Alice babbled on about how they were going to have such fun together and she would be a beautiful vampire. An outfit was left out on the bed for her to put on and Alice chirped about much Edward was going to love it as she stepped out and locked the deadbolt on the bedroom door. Bella looked down at the clothes and continued to cry. She'd just had a baby and was left with a thong and lacy see-through bra. Surely, they could all smell the bloody discharge she was having, right? How in the hell could she wear a thong? Putting the bra on, Bella growled in frustration. It would fit her before, but there was no way her milk-filled breasts would fit in the cups. Discarding the underwear, Bella walked around the room hoping to find anything else to wear. Fortunately, she found a pair of sweatpants and a t-shirt. She put those on and hoped that she'd be able to talk some sense into someone. Her heart raced as soon as she heard the door unlock. She wasn't sure who it would be and what they had in store for her. This was the worst possible outcome almost. When the door opened, it was Alice. She was annoyed with Bella's choice in clothing. I leave you with beautiful haute couture clothing that I picked out from French designers and you put on that crappy pair of pants and t-shirt. What is the matter with you, Bella? Do you do this only to make me angry? Alice flashed to Bella's side and started to rip the pants down her legs. She stopped when she saw the bloody mess in the pants. Are you menstruating right now, Bella? She gasped, stepping back and obviously holding her breath. Alice, I had a baby. You bleed for weeks after having a baby while your uterus goes back to normal. Bella shrieked hysterically at her, both furious at her so-called friend and terrified for her life. I have mammary glands that are producing milk to keep my son alive. My tiny infant son who was born early and depends on my milk to keep him alive. Alice, have you lost your mind? What is going on with you? I need a bra. A real bra with cotton cups and a breast pump to express the milk, a box of maxi pads the super overnight extra thick kind and a real pair of underpants. Bella, none of that is attractive. How am I supposed to make you beautiful with that stuff? She balked, her face obvious with distaste. Attractive? Do you really think I give two shits about being attractive? And I'm stuck here away from my husband and my son. You are not married. Your marriage to that dog does not count. He was married before. Edward doesn't believe in divorce, so the way he sees it, Jacob Black is still married and you are his whore. He will not allow you to be a whore anymore, Bella, Alice responded matter-of-factly, as if she stated the sky were blue and the grass were green. Bella was mortified. Her brain was unable to come up with a response to the crazy vampire. Bella slowly leaned down and pulled the pants up, hoping to not cause a wave of blood-scented air toward Alice. Please, Alice, go get me the things I need. I thought you were my best friend. It seemed that Bella was going to have to think smart to possibly come out of this alive. Alice, can you go get Bella the things she needs? Edward called out gently from the door. I want her to be comfortable, okay? Sure, Edward, it might take me a little while to find what she needs. Vampires don't have periods. Edward slowly came into the room and made his way toward Bella. Her eyes were on the floor and all she could think about was her impending death. She silently cried as she thought of the baby that would never see his mother. She hoped that Danny would tell him all about her. She prayed that the legends were wrong about imprints and their wolves dying together. Joseph would need a father. Are you okay, love? Edward asked her. No, I'm not, she answered, sinking down into an upholstered chair. This isn't how things were supposed to go. Edward, What was Carlyle talking about with the shipments and you doing it? What have you been doing in New York? Edward turned away from her and he slumped his shoulders. I didn't know what they were doing. I had no idea that Carlyle was behind all of this. He's been conducting experiments on humans, trying to change their DNA or inject them with venom to see what happens. His breath caught in his throat, and Bella stared at him, watching his shoulders shudder. When he turned and looked at her, she was sure if he could cry, he would be sobbing. They subjected me to the most horrifying experiments. I can't believe I'm still alive if that's what I am. I am a monster, a horrific being. I wish you had never met me. Please, leave here with me now. Let me save you. He looked at her and stared deeply into her eyes. His heart broke as he realized she was no longer his, that she fully belonged to another. He couldn't even remember what it felt like to be human. So much of his recent years had been to fulfill Arrow's wishes, he didn't even desire to live anymore. He'd wanted to take Bella and travel the world with her. He had been so sure her locked mind was a safe haven for their future. What Carlyle wants is sick. He wants to understand how you're immune to me. He wants to know if you are immune to other vampire powers. He's going to allow them to try their gifts on you. Now that you're here and have had a child, he has even gone so far as wondering if he could sire a baby with you. I can't allow that, Bella. Please, if we're going to go, we've got to go now. Alice will be able to see it and stop us, Edward pleaded with her. At first, Bella hesitated, wondering if she should trust Edward. In the end, she decided it was better to try to get away from one vampire than a fortress of vampires, so she stood and ran to him. He grabbed her in his arms and ran. He tried to get her to calm her breathing as he ran through the dark halls. Every now and then, he'd stop and listen for others. Then he would run like hell again. When he burst out into the night, Bella gasped for air. She could hear voices and Edward sped up, darting through passageways and buildings. Are we okay? Bella whispered, just a breath's noise to Edward's ear. Shish, he answered, barely into her ear as he froze. Bella, close your eyes and don't move. Bella stayed locked in his arms, terrified. She could feel the air rushing past her and realized he had jumped from somewhere. It took all her self-control to keep from screaming at the top of her lungs. They landed with barely a jostle and Edward began running again. They're here. Damn it, he cursed. Who's here, Edward? Bella asked, glancing around into the night, but completely blind in the dark. Edward, what are you doing? Rosalie shrieked. Let her go. Let her go this minute. Rosalie, what are you doing here? Why did you bring them? He sneered toward the pack. Jacob growled and Bella cried out for him. Edward held her closer to his body. You don't understand, Rose. Carlyle is behind all of this. He will get her. He won't let her go. If I give her back, they will not be protected. He will take her again. She is not safe. It's not your job to protect her, Edward. It's Jacob and the pack's job, Emmett spoke up. Be sensible. I feel like I don't even know you anymore. We need to get out of here. We all need to go. When Bella is safe, I will let her go. Then Edward dashed off into the night, the others following him. Leaving the vehicles behind, Edward took them to a nearby town so that they could try to help Bella with all of the things she needed. Thankfully, the wolves were there so Alice couldn't see any of the decisions they were making. She needs food, clothes, some female things, Rosalie. Surely, you can remember all of this, Edward told her as he walked up to the edge of the trees. The wolves circled closely behind him. Bella looked imploringly at Jacob. He walked up close behind Edward and brushed his hand down her hair. Are you okay, honey? He muttered softly. It took every ounce of willpower not to rip her from the vampire's arms and run like hell. Jacob Black, as much as you hate the idea, you need me right now. I'm sorry. I am sorry for everything. I will make sure that we get her back to the baby safely. But, right now, I can't put her down. I will end you if you so much as try to take her from me, he warned the wolf. Just so we're clear, you are outnumbered. If you do anything against her wishes, we will end you. Once we're on Quileute soil, my pack will protect her. You have no idea what we are facing, Jake. Please, let's not fight right now. I really need to pump. I don't want to lose my milk for Joseph, Bella cried. She could see the red plus sign indicating the hospital in the city. Who's going to go? I'll do it, Xander said. What am I getting? Bella blushed, read at having to explain what she needed to the wolves. Rosalie grew impatient. I'll go with you. You can cover me while I get what she needs. Jake, I need some clothes, especially some granny panties, she mumbled. Burying her face in Edward's chest, even though it felt all wrong. I'm on it, Embry answered and ran off into the city. It didn't take nearly as long for the three to return as it felt with the intense standoff. Edward knew the moment he put Bella down, his life was in danger. He had to see that she was safe. Once Xander, Rosalie and Embry returned, Edward announced that Y needed to leave the city as soon as possible and find cover. Bella insisted she needed an electrical outlet and a bathroom. They walked until they found a vacant apartment and broke in the back door. It was tense being in close quarters with 3 vampires and the wolves. Jacob was still wary of them even though he knew Rosalie was on their side. Edward held Bella in front of the bathroom door. He was about to put her down so she could go inside. Jacob, I know that you despise me. I beg you not to kill me. I need to tell you stuff. After this is all over, I'll beg you to end my life. Jacob nodded. For now, I'll grant you a reprieve. I told you that. I gave you my word. Edward listened to his thoughts and then carefully set Bella on her feet. He gently turned her toward him. Bella, I am truly sorry for everything. I mean to set this right. Then he turned and went to the kitchen, where everyone else was sitting and chatting. He listened as Jacob and Bella whispered in the bathroom. Jacob wanted to make sure that Bella was unharmed and asked if she felt they could trust Edward. He didn't hear an answer but he heard a cell phone beeping as buttons were pressed. Edward wanted desperately to know what she was telling him with his phone, but at that moment Emmett yelled at him. Edward, what the hell is going on with you? Tell us what happened with Carlisle. He's in Volterra. We thought he was missing. No, sadly, he is in Volterra and even though he pretends to not be part of the Volturi, he is. He is much more powerful than he ever let on. I'll wait until Jacob comes back before telling you guys everything. I'm back, so let's get to it, Jacob said, as he grabbed a chair and sat staring at Edward with his full attention. Edward tried desperately to listen to the thoughts of the wolves, but they were still silent. Well, first of all, in a show of faith, I want you to know that since you and Bella have, he cleared his throat, sealed the imprint, I can no longer hear the thoughts of the pack. The pack members all looked at each other, nodding. He confirmed what they already suspected. Jacob was the one to speak. We assumed after we ran into you in the woods and you didn't respond to my thoughts. He gave a look of disbelief. You saw me in the woods and didn't attack. You were leaving and didn't seem to have done anything. I wasn't going to put my pack in danger. Edward divulged everything that had happened. He shared his part in the kidnappings, how he was tortured, how he discovered Carlisle's experiments and last Carlisle's plans for Bella. Jacob growled. Jacob, you cannot go back to Washington until Carlisle has been dealt with. If you leave, he will just follow you. This time it was me that got Bella, but I don't want her to die. Any other vampires that come for her will likely kill her. If they don't, Carlisle will. He plans to use her blood, impregnate her, and then change her. Banging his fists on the table, Jacob stood up and paced the room. Bella came running out, dressed in fresh jeans and a sweater. Her hair was wrapped in a towel and her eyes were wide. Jake, she called out. When she saw him, she ran and wrapped her arms around his waist. What's wrong? Jacob leaned down and captured her lips. I knew we couldn't trust them. You can trust me, Jacob, Rosalie reassured, standing up. She looked around the room and looked each wolf in the eye, giving a silent promise. I know it doesn't make sense to you. My life was stolen from me. I don't want that to happen to another woman. Quickly, she turned and looked at Edward. What you have done is despicable. You are worse than a monster for letting them kill those women and to use your gift to find them. I should burn you right here. But I'll let you use that gift for something good before I do. With that, Rosalie and Emmett walked outside claiming they wanted to patrol the area and make sure everyone was safe. Silently the room cleared out and Jacob sat down, pulling Bella into his lap. He was so glad she was okay. He took his phone out and showed her the pictures of Joseph he had taken and the ones that Leah had sent since they left. Bella cried thinking about the 2 days of her son's life that she had missed. Bells, we can't go home yet. We have to take care of this threat first. I want to do everything we can to go home and never worry about this again. She nodded and leaned forward to kiss her husband. Thankfully, Edward had a change of heart. Bella thought about the message that she showed Jacob in the bathroom. She wasn't sure if they could trust Edward. Part of her believed that he was remorseful, but the other part of her believed that if he had the chance, he would take her and run. In the apartment, Bella and Jacob sat together in the bedroom. Rosalie had stolen Crow, Babbly the best breast pump in the hospital. Bella sat with the little bottles hooked up, trying to relax and express the milk. She was so full it was painful. Tears filled her eyes as she thought of Boo. All the milk that was being wasted instead of nourishing her baby. Jacob didn't say anything. He didn't know what to say to her in that moment. He was sad, furious and terrified all at once. At Leah's, he knew that Joseph was in good hands at the hospital. The wolves were protecting Danny and the kids as well at their house. Danny had been shocked when Jacob talked to her about everything that was going on. His wolf was not happy with the proximity of the vampires. Bella cried as she poured the milk down the drain in the bathroom. She knew that as long as she kept her supply up, she would be a BLE to feed Joseph when she had him back in her arms. It was difficult to remain positive after what had happened with Alice and Carlisle. Clearly, Alice had completely lost her mind. It was beyond terrifying how evil Carlisle really was. Experimenting on people, experimenting on Edward to the point that he would cry if he could. Once Bella had cleaned herself up, dressed and pumped, Jacob announced they needed to move locations. Everyone agreed and prepared to move on. Jacob held Bella in his arms as they ran off into the night. Edward tried to read Jacob's thoughts. It continued to be silence. It was frustrating to someone that was used to doing it, but for the first time, Edward found it peaceful. To be in the presence of a group and not hear their constant thought stream was a relief. His vast vampire mind was able to focus on the plan to save Bella. As they ran, Edward led them toward an empty house. Rosalie gave the house a quick lap to make sure there were no other NTS and that Edward wasn't leading them into a trap. After she deemed it clear, Xander ran a lap as well. When he said it was clear, then Jacob went in the house with the others. They all spread out into various rooms before meeting back in a family room that had several large couches. Emmett cheered when he found the television remote and turned it on. He flipped through the channels at an inhuman speed, trying to find something to watch. So what's the plan? Jacob spoke to Edward. I think we need to set up Alice and Carlisle. Make them think I'm willing to hand her over in exchange for my freedom. Then you guys can surprise them and take them out. That sounds entirely too easy. Besides, Alice has to know we're in town, right? She can smell us a mile away. I know we can pick up your stink, Jacob snarked back. Alice doesn't know who is here. Of course, if she smelled your particular odor, she would think it's you. I could tell her it's only you, Edward shrugged, trying to work the plan out. We aren't going to their place. We will not agree to that. I don't want their backup freak shows coming to help, Jacob responded. I agree. That is not good. The plan was set into motion. Edward Old call Alice and Carlisle in the morning to make the arrangement. Edward wanted to make sure that the humans had time to eat and rest. After they all went to bed, Edward paced the family room floor. You're going to wear a path on the floor, Rosalie spat. Just sit down and stop it. I can't, he admitted. You're hearing this too, aren't you? Rosalie nodded. It was terrible for her to hear Bella relay the events of Volterra to Jacob. Listening to how Alice had violated her and how she felt during that horrible shower. To add insult to injury, Alice walking in and violently removing Bella's pants made things even worse. Rosalie shook with fury. It made her relive the memories of the last day of her human life. It was a moment in time that she wanted to forget but couldn't. Edward could feel her anger and grief. I will personally rip her hands from her body before I rip her head from her neck, she vowed. I'm going out for a walk, Edward stated. Emmett stood and blocked his exit. No, I don't think so. Edward read the doubt in Emmett's mind. Would you like to go with me, then? Emmett glanced toward Rosalie. Neither were sure if Edward was to be trusted. You both know I could have run with her. I didn't. You can trust me. Rosalie nodded to Emmett. He walked out the door behind Edward. During the night, they walked around the countryside looking out for other vampires and danger. Near Ingdon they returned to the house with food for breakfast. They put the food on the counter and sat watching the Italian news. There was an hour and a half before Edward was to call Carlyle and set the plan in motion. The tension in the kitchen was quite high. Usually the pack consumed a lot of food but not this time. They ate only to give their wolves energy to protect. Bella picked at a pastry. She wasn't hungry at all. Her mind in many other places. Edward stepped outside to make the phone call. Jacob demanded that he stay within earshot so that they knew the call was legit. He didn't want to walk into a trap Edward set up. Once he was finished, he came back in the house and nodded. 1 hour we'll meet them. We have to get going now so that the wolves can get in place. Emmett and Rosalie, you will have to stay far enough away that they will not know you're there. Or else, they will know something is up. They think Jacob is my prisoner and that he's only cooperating in hopes of saving Bella's life. Solemnly, they all filed out of the house, following Edward again. The wolves were able to find tree cover and phase. Jacob was relieved as he could silently communicate with the other wolves. They were just as nervous as he was. Their enhanced senses were focused on every sound, scent and movement around them. No one wanted to be caught off guard. Bella was being carried by Emmett. It rankled the wolf, but strategically Jacob wanted to be able to take out a threat without worrying about hurting Bella. Suddenly, Edward stopped. He gestured to the wolves. Apparently, the vamps had arrived early as well. They brought their own company. Edward squatted down and began scratching furiously in the dirt. He wrote, "Look out. Many gifted vampires here. Their gifts affect your mind. Make you think things are there that are not. Protect Bella no matter what." We all nodded. He stood and walked out of the trees. Carlyle, I thought we agreed that you would not bring anyone else. Carlyle laughed. I didn't agree. That's just what you asked, Edward. Tell those foul creatures you have with you to come on out. Rosalie, Emmett, you come out too. Everyone stepped out from the woods. Ooh, ho, ho, ho. Look at what we have here. Edward, you have done a mighty fine job. The wolves snarled as Rosalie screamed at Edward. Edward jumped back away from both sides, afraid the wolves would kill first and knowing that Carlyle would. I did not bring them to you. I came to help Bella, that is all. Edward yelled over the din. You disgust me, Carlyle, and to think I looked up to you. Ought of you like a father, and I followed in your ways, Edward spat. You followed in my ways, that is for sure, Carlyle smiled. Now give me Bella and her mate. I'll let the rest of you go if you do so without a fight. No, he won't, Rosalie screamed. You were despicable, Carlyle. She charged toward him but was struck down by Jane, who stood laughing as Rosalie thrashed in pain. Emmett ran full speed toward Jane, who was stopped by a huge vampire. It didn't take long before a huge fight ensued. Wolves attacked vampires. Rosalie, Emmett and Edward all fought to keep them away from Bella, who laid on the ground in a ball, terrified. Bella focused on Jacob and the ties she felt to him. As long as he was safe, she was okay. If he were injured, she didn't know what would happen. Surprisingly, the wolves quickly took advantage in the fight. They had already killed most of the vampire guard, leaving Alice, Carlisle and several defenders. Rosalie was screaming at Alice about touching people and keeping her hands to herself. She reached out and ripped them from her body. This caused Alice to scream so loud that Bella cupped her hands over her ears, trying to protect her hearing. "What do you think you're doing, Rosé? Give me back my hands, right now. What's the matter? Can't you see that I won't?" Rosalie laughed maniacally as tossed the hands into a fire that Edward had just lit. "No." Alice flew at Rosalie, but Jacob ripped her off and shook her, dropping her on the ground. She was quick, but without the benefit of anticipating his next move, he was unmatched. Quickly, he disassembled her body and Rose chucked the pieces in the fire. This infuriated Carlisle, who dove straight for Jacob. Bella buckled under the pain when Jacob was hurt. Edward noticed that she was left unguarded and ran over and grabbed her, running off into the night. The wolves were tied up helping Jacob and didn't notice. Once all of the vampires were dead, except Rosalie and Emmett, they all turned to check on Bella. Jacob and the pack howled into the night as soon as they noticed she was gone. In the pack mind, they all cursed Edward. They spiraled out from the grounds and followed the only trace of Edward's scent. It was the path they took in. Focused like a laser, Jacob raced back to the house, his nose in the air and his ears perked, listening carefully. He pushed out against his bond to Bella and felt her. She didn't seem to be injured, but she was panicked. When they burst into the house, Jacob snarled at Edward, who was sitting on the couch, looking unperturbed. He pointed to the bedroom and Jacob stormed in to find that Bella was curled up on the bed. She felt him enter the room and jumped up on the bed and then into his open arms. "Oh my God, I thought you were gone. I thought he took you and ran." Jacob kissed her face and neck, breathing in her scent, though it was tainted with the stench of vampire. I'm okay. Are you okay?" she asked, trying to check Jacob for injuries. She could see scratches on his skin, but they didn't look fresh, so she knew he was healing. "I think I am. I need to go take care of something," he said, setting her down and holding her hand instead. "Edward, what the hell? Why did you run off?" Jacob asked. He pointed to a spot close to the door where he wanted Bella to wait as he walked closer to the vampire. "Jacob, I wasn't sure if Carlisle was going to try to take Bella. I brought her here, where you could easily find me. I wasn't going to take her. If I was, I would be long gone." Edward sighed, quickly realizing his error as the pack crept in closer to him. "You've been killing women for years. Someone has to pay for that," Jacob warned lowly. "It was Carlisle. He was behind it. Please, I've paid for my sins. You have no idea what kind of laboratory he had set up in the place. It was awful, absolutely awful. I will not interfere in your lives anymore. Please, spare mine," Edward begged. "Why should we? Other than you were tortured. What about all those women who were assaulted, raped, changed against their will?" Rosalie said, getting in Edward's face. If she could have spit, she would have. "Look, maybe I have a solution. Maybe you, me and Emmett could go back to Volterra and try to set things right." "I don't think so, Edward," Emmett spoke up. "Sorry, but no one in this room trusts you anymore." Edward looked around the room and tried to walk around. But he didn't have any room to move. Jacob, Rosalie and Emmett were in the center of the circle and the rest of the wolves surrounded them. Edward wasn't used to having a disadvantage in a room. "Let's go outside for this. Bella doesn't need to witness this," Edward stated evenly. They surrounded him as they exited the house. Paul stayed behind with Bella at Jacob's command. He turned the TV on and turned up the volume. Bella slowly made her way over to the couch and sat beside him. It was only a few seconds later that he jumped up and phased in the middle of the family room, growling loudly. Bella shrank back, afraid to get in his way. The window from the other side of the house crashed in and Edward ran frantically toward Bella. Paul was fierce though. He dodged and shoved Edward at every chance. It took only a minute for Jacob to realize what Edward had done, and he came in the house and grabbed Bella from the fray. He left his pack to destroy Edward and ran with Bella. He would have to find a place to hide until they could go back for their bags. They couldn't travel home without their IDs, passports, and money. Jacob sat on a bench in a little park. He was Ferrano, away that Bella couldn't hear or see anything, but he was close enough to be sure that sneaky bastard burned. He was angry with himself because he nearly let him get away by trusting him. It was all a rouse so that Edward could snatch Bella and run. Within 15 minutes, Paul jogged over to the park and got them. He had everything they needed in his hands. He didn't want Bella back in the house. "Let's get out of here and go home," Jake said. "No, let's go see our son," Bella replied. She stood but wobbled on her feet. Exhaustion was taking over, so Jake grabbed her and carried her. It wasn't going to be easy to get back to the airport from the little Italian town they were stranded in. "I got us a ride," Rosalie called with a smile. She stood beside a couple of SUVs. They were uncommon for Europe, but somehow she found 3 vehicles to take them back to the airport. Jacob didn't ask how she came to acquire them. He didn't really care. All he wanted was to return to Washington and see his children. They sat silently as the convoy headed to the airport. Jacob had his arm around Bella as he watched out the window. He was truly thankful that everyone was okay. He wished that Bella hadn't had to go through what she did. But they were both aware it could have been a lot worse. Vampires were sick creatures. Somehow, Rosalie and Emmett didn't seem so evil, and when they got their tickets back to the US paid for, courtesy of Rosalie. They parted ways. Emmett slipped Jacob his number in case anything ever came up. They promised to help if they could. Jacob simply nodded and took the number. He wanted to throw it away, he really did. But the dad in him knew that if the safety of his children was in play again, he'd call them. So he slipped it into his wallet and kept it, just in case. A group of large, well-built men boarding an aircraft drew a bit of attention in the airport. Xander posed as he walked, drawing on the attention he was getting. Bella laughed and shoved him in the back, telling him to get over himself. She reminded him that both his body and his ego needed to fit on the plane. Just as they were getting on, a male flight attendant greeted them. He winked at Xander as he walked past. Bella burst out in laughter as she noticed the wolf lose his balance momentarily as he tried to give the man a wide berth. They filled the first-class section of the aircraft, a commercial flight their quickest route home. Bella leaned on Jake's arm as she waited for the door to close and the plane to push back from the jetway. Before the plane took off, she was sound asleep. She could not wait to get back home to Joseph. Jacob leaned his head against hers and dozed lightly. He wasn't sure when he would be able to sleep soundly again. It wouldn't be easy. His first priority was to call and check up on the kids and then get Joey home to La Push. Ended. Tell me what you want next. And yeah, imp note. You've probably noticed, we're about to hit 500 subscribers very soon. And guess what? I have a special surprise planned just for our 500 subscribers milestone, but I'll reveal it only when we reach it. So come on, let's make it happen fast. I can't wait to share this with all of you.